Hello and welcome back to True Crime Guys Podcast. But this is no normal episode of True Crime Guys Podcast. This is episode number 6 of the Freeloader series. The Freeloader series is old Patreon episodes from approximately about 2 years ago that are just now being released onto the free platforms. So we call it the Freeloader series because it's funny, because you're not paying for anything, but you're still getting it. You know what I mean? It's funny. Some people don't like it. Some people leave bad reviews. It's all good. But guys, this week, it's finally here. The Ted Bundy week. The Theodore Robert Bundy week. Mr. Shockingly Evil Sly Beetle Driver. You know what I'm talking about. It's finally here. So, without further ado, guys, let's jump into Ted Bundy. Oh, real quick. This episode was originally released or aired December 4th, 2017 on Patreon. Okay? So don't come at us with new findings because we already heard about them. Alright? So here we go. This is the show. Get you another little taste of Patreon, you bunch of freeloaders.
A tan Volkswagen drove by slowly, and then it kind of stopped and backed up, and the cute driver leaned over and rolled down the passenger window and asked me if I'd like a ride.
All I'm saying is we're going to have a good time.
Still there, Ted?
I'm still here.
Do you think we could talk again, Ted?
Anytime, right?
Okay.
Ted Bundy, quite a scumbag.
Is he?
Yeah. But fuck,
So I've heard.
fuck was he interesting.
But interesting God. Scumbag though.
Dude, you can't get enough studying for this one.
really
we
can't.
could have taken a month off, used the entire thing to study, and still would want more.
Yeah.
Endlessly fascinating.
I think we got some interesting facts.
Let's get into it.
Coming your way.
Let's get into it
right.
so we can dive in.
All right.
To Ted Bundy.
For everything he did to the girls, the bludgeoning and the strangulation, humiliating their bodies, torturing them, I feel that the electric chair is too good for him.
Those who I've harmed, those who I've caused so much grief,
Here is a man who seemingly had everything.
even if they don't believe my expression of sorrow and remorse, will believe what I'm saying now.
He's intelligent, he's charismatic, he's handsome.
That there is loose in their towns and their communities people like me today.
He is an affront to civilized society.
Whose dangerous impulses are being fueled day in and day out by violence in the media in its various forms, particularly sexualized violence.
He decided that he was not going to play by anybody's rules.
And what scares me, and let's come into the present now, because what I'm talking about happened 20, 30 years ago, that is, in my formative stages.
Our son is the best son in the world. He's a very normal, active boy.
When I see what's on cable TV, some of the movies, some of the violence in the movies that come into homes today.
He's convicted of 3 murders, but authorities think he actually killed 36 and perhaps many more.
That stuff is, I'm telling you, from personal experience, the most, that is graphic violence on screen.
Changing his appearance like a chameleon.
As it gets into the home to children who may be unattended or unaware that they may be a Ted Bundy who has that vulnerability.
I'm not guilty. Does that include the time I stole a comic book when I was 5 years old?
To that predisposition to be influenced by that kind of behavior, by that kind of movie, that kind of violence.
It's still there, Ted.
All right. Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy. Here we are. Theodore Robert Cowell, as he's how he started life.
The one and only. Just immediate thoughts on studying him. What did we use to study? We both read different books, which is perfect. Well, listen to different books. Thank you, audible.com.
That's right.
For providing us with books that someone reads to us.
Right. And it'd be great if you would pay us for these mentions.
I know, right? Instead of us having to pay for your books.
Right. I read The Bundy Murders, A Comprehensive History by Kevin M. Sullivan. And when I started it, I was like, damn, I wish I had enough time to listen to all three, because he wrote 3 books about Ted, and like each one got increasingly like more specific.
That's the thing too about doing this podcast is like sometimes there's somebody that I want to continue studying, but then we've got to move on to the next one. Like we get 1 week to do Ted Bundy here.
Yeah.
Granted, we didn't do an episode last week, so we kind of may have gotten a head start.
It was Thanksgiving though.
But the problem was last week we planned on doing an episode and we studied for someone else.
Yeah.
And like we were all lined up, but I didn't get back from hunting. I just went hunting, and I thought it was going to be a 4-day trip, turned into a 6-day trip.
It happens.
And I listened to an audiobook on a different guy that we're going to be doing next week.
Right.
So we've like studied for
we
2
both
people.
Did.
Yeah, we studied, and then Mike was like, "Well, let's just not doing this week since you just got back from hunting. We should have already recorded. Let's do Ted Bundy next week, and then we'll do the I-5 Killer. Little sneak preview for you patron people. That'll be next week's episode.
That's right. It's kind of Ted Bundy-esque.
Very. I think if there is a guy that's the most similar to
for sure
to the I-5 Killer, it'd be Ted Bundy.
We're kind of doing like 3 Casanova killers in a row, really.
Right?
Any 3 of these guys could have been called the Casanova Killer.
There's arguments. I don't know how much of a Casanova Killer Ted Bundy was. People say he was real persuasive. I after studying him extensively, I disagree.
Yeah, he had a lot of strikeouts, right?
A lot of strikeouts.
A lot of
but
people
dude
he walked up to.
Dude was just creepy.
Yeah,
he was just like, and I can tell like when he's walking. Any video I've seen of him. His eye movements, his his body language is just all no good. Like, if I'm a woman, I'm like, get me the fuck away from this guy immediately. Like, we're not going on a date. No,
fuck if his arm's broken. No, I have nothing to do with this guy.
Right?
Yeah, I totally agree. His eyes were always beady.
I think people they like the outward perception of him that people that haven't really looked into him. They just kind of like hear things about him and this and that. It's that he was this good looking. Casanova type guy. No, he would hit women over the head. He would coerce them over to his car, hit them over the head with something, and they weren't willing participants.
These weren't women who were even interested in like one night stands and stuff. Like these were women who were just trying to help him with something because he lied to them, saying he has a problem or whatever. Yeah, it's not like he was just overwhelmingly handsome, and then they just like flocked around and followed him and shit, like people portray.
Not until after he was killed, everybody became obsessed and thought he was like this amazing, great looking. I want to be with him, and he's lovely.
Yeah,
nah.
Well, I feel like we have a lower standard for like really bad criminals, like what they should look like.
Right.
I feel like if Ted Bundy never did anything and he was an actor, we'd be like, he's like a C. It's like a C-list actor.
Right.
He's not a Clooney or a Pitt or
Should we talk about the fact that there's a movie being made on Ted Bundy?
We definitely should.
It was announced this year, and the actor who is going to be playing him, we think is all wrong.
Yeah. I mean,
not that there's anything wrong with him.
No. It's probably a bigger hit because he's in it, but we have a much better actor.
Right.
A much better actor. But the guy that is picked to play him is Zac Efron.
Zac Efron. You can see a resemblance. And he's a fine enough actor. Good looking dude.
Maybe if they give him brown contacts.
But no, we got a guy that's
we've got a guy
who is already an actor, who's been in movies you've heard of.
Yep.
And he's the doppelganger of Ted Bundy. He's his fucking twin.
Get your Google ready because you guys are about to agree with us.
You might have already heard of him if you're a fan. Jesse Bradford.
Yes.
Of Swim Fan fame.
Right. Bring It On.
Bring It On. I think he was in Bring It On again. I'm not sure.
He was the cool brother of the
dude,
brunette.
He's fucking Ted Bundy.
Guitar.
He's Ted Bundy.
He's Ted Bundy.
Dude, he's got the same dark brown hair, curly brown hair, same brown eyes, same facial features, same 5 o'clock shadow.
He's got the thin, pointy nose.
Yep. Dude, he's him.
That's him.
He should be playing Ted 100%. Bundy. I think we need to start a petition.
We should.
Get Zac Efron out of there. We get that he's the bigger name, and he might bring in some like Efron fans to watch this. But dude, for true crime people, let's get a damn look-alike here. And this guy's also a good actor. There's nothing wrong with him.
I think he'd be
I would argue better than Zac Efron. Better actor.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't seen him in a long time. So.
Dude, his emotions in Swim Fan, he was legitimately scared of that crazy bitch. Did he move you?
No, I said, did he move you?
Oh, he did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
all right. So you want to talk about the case, or
yeah? Let's get into Ted Bundy.
All right.
The serial killer of all serial killers. I'd say he's. If you're gonna, we've mentioned in the past, if you're gonna immediately names that come to the top of your head when you think serial killer, you got John Wayne Gacy, you got Jeffrey Dahmer, and then there's Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy's kind of the rock star. Not necessarily
in that order, probably backwards.
Ted Bundy's the rock star of them. Though.
Yeah,
like the people that are really into true crime. I don't know. I kind of think like,
but Jeff,
Dahmer's
and John,
probably number one as far as like if you were gonna just go up to a random person in the street, like name a serial killer, they're gonna say Dahmer, Gacy. I think Ted Bundy's like.
I disagree.
Every true crime person's favorite, but.
I don't know. I disagree. I think Bundy's going to be right there.
You think so?
Yeah, I do. I think he's going to be right there. He's going to be one of the first ones mentioned.
And after studying him, going into this, I knew the basics on him, but he's just endlessly fascinating, and I want more. Even after a week, and even after so the book that I got, we didn't even mention it.
Yeah.
Was the book on Ted Bundy.
Oh, the book.
It is. Anne Rule, The Stranger Beside Me. It's the one you see everybody posting about. It was a great book, and in audio form, it was 19 hours.
Yeah.
Very long book.
Yeah. My book was like 10 and a half, I think. So.
And it was very fascinating because Anne Rule, famous true crime author, this was, I believe, her first actual book she wrote. And she knew Ted Bundy. She worked alongside him, and she was a friend of him for over 10 years.
Right.
And even after he was locked up, was continuing to write to him, and he was writing back to her. They had falling outs, no doubt. Yeah. And throughout the whole book, she's unsure of whether her friend that she never saw a dark side of could have actually been the guy that he was.
Wait, at the end of the book, she said she was still unsure?
No. At the end of the book, she finally came around and said,
Jesus
okay, I'm
Christ,
convinced.
Lady.
I'm convinced, and I understand why he's being killed, and I think he should. And she almost actually testified as a character witness against him at a certain point. Which would have been awkward for her as being a friend to go up there and say, I think he is capable to stand trial for this. It was a question of whether he was sane enough to stand trial, yeah. And she was going to go up as a character witness as a friend of him for a long time to say, yes, he knew what he was doing, and he should be held accountable.
But did he?
Great
he
book.
Knew what he was doing, but could he control it?
Great book. A lot of behind the scenes. A lot of stuff on the trial. A lot of stuff on him as a person. What she saw of him. It was almost flattering in his sense. You didn't see, and it didn't go in detail on the crimes much, which I kind of wish it would have.
Yeah.
It was kind of lacking, but I'm sure your book did. So maybe we got a nice little balance here.
Pretty good detail.
Because you said your book didn't really go. You said you didn't know much about the trial and all that stuff.
Right.
The trials, we should say. There were several of them.
Right.
Different states. He was committing murder in several different states, and some believe that he killed a lot more than he's given
upwards
credit
of like
for.
130 possibly.
Yeah. At one point, an investigator came to him and said, "Is this number of, I think it was 36?" They asked him, "Is this right?" And he said, "Add a digit to that, and you'll have it." And they were unsure what that meant, whether it meant add a digit.
360.
Yeah. Does he mean add a digit to the end, to the beginning,
right.
Just one more, like 37?
Is it a decimal? Did you knock somebody out really bad?
Right. Oh, he did that, yeah.
Yeah. But
many of them.
Right.
But so let's get into his childhood, and we'll go through this in an order that makes sense.
All right.
Theodore Ted Robert Cowell was his birth name.
Right.
He was born November 24th, 1946. He shares a birth date with actress Katherine Heigl. Not a big fan. I heard she's a biatch.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I heard everyone that worked with her just says she was a pain in the ass and took herself too seriously.
Shout out to you, Katherine.
Yeah, I loved the movie Knocked Up though. She was great in that movie. But she was kind of playing a biatch in that movie too. I guess it was just natural for her.
What, do you just play yourself?
Also shares a birthday with Jimmy Graham, the football player for the Saints, or formerly of the Saints, now with the Seattle Seahawks. Not a big fan of him either, because he plays for my rival team.
Right, and I don't like the Saints, so.
Yeah, and I just think he's not that great. He's just huge.
Oh.
Just like reaches over the top of guys and just catches the ball.
Right.
And oddly enough, Ted Bundy shares a birthday with my mother.
No way.
Lovely woman, yeah.
Oh.
November 24th.
Wow. So he does not deserve it.
I know, right? Shout out to anyone born on November 24th and shares a birthday with Ted Bundy if you're listening.
Congratulations.
Yeah. He was born to Eleanor Louise Cowell. She was 22 years old, and this was in the 40s, and she was unwed when she had this
Right, which
baby.
is very disgraceful then.
She got, I guess, she met a guy who was a World War II veteran. This is right after World War II. I think he was a sailor or something in the Navy maybe. And
sounds reasonable.
She got knocked up. They didn't stay together.
Right.
And she ended up in the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers in Burlington, Vermont, because her family was not okay with what happened. They were not okay with, this is, like we said, the 40s, and unwed babies were not widely accepted. Now it's totally cool, but after the birth at the unwed mothers in Burlington, Vermont, he would end up being raised in his grandparents' household, but he was told that his grandparents were his parents.
Right, and his mom was his sister.
And that his mother was his sister. Now, I've heard conflicting things. There's times where he says that he heard conversations within the household that led him to believe that his mother was actually his sister.
Yeah, and I would guess that the grandparents probably gave her a lot of responsibilities over him to be a sister.
Right.
You know what I'm trying to say? Like probably not to be a mother, but I bet she took a lot of the motherly duties.
The official,
I mean, she probably felt like she should have.
The official story is that he believed that his sister was, or that his mom was his sister up until like he was teen years, like in 1969.
Yeah.
Supposedly he believed that all the way up until, I'm sure he had his suspicions though, for sure.
Right.
And now there's also conflicting reports on the household that he grew up in as it pertains to his grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
His grandfather, the early story from him on his grandfather was that he was a jolly fellow, like almost like a Santa Claus type figure, like a great guy. His household was lovely. There was no, as far as we can tell, there was no brain trauma.
This was
at a
the
young age.
early trial
abuse.
story, right?
Yeah, supposedly no abuse. No, there was never any brain trauma. We've heard about with serial killers where the frontal lobe damage. None of that. No abuse in the household, supposedly, until later in his final trials when he's trying to get appeals from the death penalty.
Right.
And they started considering doing the insanity plea finally, which he never wanted to do all the way through. He just pled innocent the whole time. That's when there was a character witness that came up and said that his grandfather was this abusive guy, abused his grandmother, abused animals. Like there's all these crazy stories about his grandfather swinging animals around by their tail.
There was a story that he pushed his aunt down the grandfather pushed his aunt down the stairs.
Yeah.
To push Ted's aunt down the stairs.
Yeah.
And that he would abuse Ted as well. But what we're saying is you got to kind of take this with a grain of salt because it came out in desperation at the end. It's like, why not just lead with that right off the bat? Like, how does that hurt your chances at the beginning? So you kind of got to, you weigh the options here.
Yeah.
But there are, like my book passed it off as fact.
Right. A lot of stuff does.
Yeah.
Now, Anne Rule, the whole book, like the first 17 hours of it, anytime she mentioned his childhood, it was his grandfather and his grandmother were great. Obviously, we're kind of hard on his mother for having him unwed, but they tried to keep it a secret because they knew that it would be no good to have that out there because of the stigma back then. Like kids were called bastards if they didn't have a father.
Right.
If their mother had an unwed child, that was like
it was to
you'd
protect
get picked
Ted
on.
and her.
It was to yeah. And so by the time there's also another crazy story that came out. I don't know if it was later on at the same time that all this stuff came out of his grandfather as a character thing to him to make him look crazy. But there's a story that supposedly when he was 3 or 4 years old and still living in his grandparents' house, living with his aunt as well.
Right.
Supposedly his aunt was asleep and woke up surrounded by knives.
Yeah.
And Ted was standing there. 3 or 4 year old Ted was standing there smiling at her.
He was like, "Look, Auntie, you're the Joker.
I could have killed you. I could have decapitated you."
Just surrounded by kitchen knives in her bed.
Yeah, and little Ted is just smiling at her.
Apparently there was, my book referenced other instances. Like that was like the most extreme, but there were times where he would just sneak knives in like random places near her. But it's funny that like he never did any of this stuff to his mother, apparently. Yeah. Like he always held his mother to the highest regard. Even when he found out that she was not his sister but his mother, he never treated her any different. But
he would talk to other people about how that was the widely accepted version of what went wrong with Ted. It may have been nature. He wasn't right. He was a sociopath or an
There's some crazy theories out there.
Antisocial personality from the get-go, or it was the trauma of finding out that he was an illegitimate child and lied to his entire upbringing.
Yeah.
That really seemed to get to him because even Anne Rule said that when they were working alongside each other, which we'll get to, it's later on in the story, but just as a character thing for him, like what might have went wrong is that it really bugged him because he was kind of an elitist personality. Like we'll get more into as well. Like
he was very much about the facade.
He looked down on anybody that wasn't successful. He had this grandeur view of himself. He would have been a perfect son of like the Elizabeth Bathory, the blood countess. Like,
oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Like he was an elitist. Like the one woman that he like was infatuated with later on in the story was like this perfect, and all the girls that he killed were these beautiful college girls, like
wealthy families.
Yeah. And I think he had this inferior mentality from the get-go because he didn't grow up in a rich family. And then when he found out that he was an illegitimate child, that his mother, had him and he didn't know who his father was, that's a big thing that can really mess with a man's psyche is if they never got to meet their father. And
because I think growing up, you kind of look to your father as like, that's who I am. Like that's who I want to copy. Mm-hmm. Like that's my hero or whatever. So when you don't have one, you're like, who am I? So you're kind of constantly searching for this path.
And then you find out as a teen, and then you find out as a teen that you were lied to by your mother, who you love, or supposedly your sister, whatever it is. You find out your sister's your mother, and you were lied to your whole childhood.
Right.
That's got to be awkward, especially for someone like Ted, who, like I said, he was an elitist, and when his mother ends up getting. We're about to get to where he and his mother end up moving away from the family.
Right. Well, real quick, while we're still talking about the grandfather and everything, how probable do you think it is that the grandfather was a good person and then Ted ended up so twisted, man? Because there's obviously some psychological issues here. I mean, didn't his grandfather also expose him to porn at a super young age?
All the porn stuff, I'm not sure I believe either, too, because that came down in a time of...
But how do you explain this, though? How do you explain this?
No,
his upbringing really wasn't that bad.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, because later on, the final interview that he did, everybody's seen it. His final interview, the day he's about to be executed, like minutes before he's executed, like an hour before or whatever, he brings in a pastor, right? Like a reverend. I think he was Mormon or something.
Okay.
And the guy is known to be anti-porn, this pastor guy that he's talking to.
Yeah, most of them are.
And that's what the conversation was going to be about, how porn caused Ted to be what he was. He saw it at a young age. He used to find porn in dumpsters and whatnot with other kids in the neighborhood, and just like all of us did.
But supposedly this wasn't just porn. Like this was violent.
But that shit didn't even exist. That shit was not readily accessible back then. It wasn't something you would find in the trash. Normal dudes, like, you would really have to go a long ways to get that stuff, and to just find it in the trash is not likely. You know what I'm saying?
Well, from what I heard in the book that I read by Kevin Sullivan, it wasn't that he found it in the trash. Like this is stuff that his grandfather sought out.
Really?
And had hid in their garage or whatever. Huh. And then Ted found it one day, and then he just kind of like let him keep looking at it. He was just like, "Oh, well, you found it now." So
now, another thing that could have happened was, and I find this more likely, these things there was these crime story, almost comic book magazines that you could get back then. They were really actually kind of cool looking.
Okay.
But like to a child, they were pictures. They had these illustrations, these really beautifully done illustrations of like women being strangled and like stuff like that. And they were always beautiful women. And it was like the crime story in the end of the thing would be like this detective with a flashlight catching the guy strangling the woman or whatever.
Right.
But all the pictures leading up to that were like women being strangled on boats and stuff like that. I can see that. An early Ted finding these type of magazines. Maybe his grandfather had those.
Possibly.
Maybe somebody he knew had these detective magazines. If you saw pictures of them, a documentary I watched on YouTube had like pictures of these old crime magazines from the time in the 50s and 60s.
And so you're saying it would be very captivating to a child, and it would look almost cartoonish, but...
And to a child with the right set of... whatever's going on in his head. If maybe 99% of children can see these and whatever, but to a young Ted, it might have just been the right thing, kind of like Dahmer with the bones when his father brought the bones out from under the house and it just clicked. Yep. It could have been that type of thing for Ted. I don't think it was porn. I think it more likely to be something like those magazines.
The violence seemed like what did it for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing about Ted's psyche is that he was we talked about him being an elitist, but he loved possessions and objects, and like maybe it had something to do with he didn't have a lot of money growing up,
right?
And he had I don't know, like he loved objects and he wanted to possess things, and that's what he ended up doing with women. Like he just wanted them, like their body. He didn't care if they were alive or not. He just wanted to own them. He wanted to own shit.
Right. Well, if they're not alive, that's the ultimate ownership. I mean, he can do what he wants with them. Yeah. Maybe that was the drive, but.
And supposedly they found some of his victims later on when they would find them. They would have like makeup that they didn't own. They would be wearing their hair would be done in a different like he
He would change their rooms, like some of the girls that he abducted from their rooms. Like he would change their room to do something different, make their bed a way they never did.
Make them into his
hang their
idea,
clothes up.
Make them into his idea of a perfect woman. And we'll get to like his first girlfriend had a lot to do with this later on. But we need to stick to
one more crazy theory that me and Lauren dismissed, but I think it's worth mentioning. Some people have thrown this out there that it could be possible that his grandfather was his dad. I mean, I don't believe it. Lauren doesn't believe it either, right? You don't think that's true?
That's the first time I heard it when you brought it up to me before.
No,
the show.
I've heard it in multiple things. Okay. It is a theory that's going around out there.
Now you look at his mother, and he looks exactly like his mother. He obviously the strong genetics,
and he looks like his grandfather too. But it's his grandfather.
He's a cow. He's a cow. He's not a Bundy.
Right.
His mom, right where we're at in the story, his mom moves. Louise, she moves to Tacoma, Washington,
right,
and that's where she would meet a guy named Johnny Culpepper Bundy.
You know, she actually met somebody before Johnny. It was a very short fling, but apparently it was serious enough where she changed his name. Ted's name actually got changed twice.
Okay,
I can't remember exactly what it was. It's very insignificant, but this is how just on a whim his mother was. Like she moved, she met this guy, she was in love with him, changed his name, didn't work out, that guy left, Ted's still stuck with this guy's last name,
right?
You know what I mean? And then she met Culpepper. So Ted's name actually got changed twice. So think about what that does to your psyche. It's like, oh, first I'm Ted Cow, and then now I'm Ted so-and-so, and now I'm Ted Bundy. It's like, who am I?
Right.
You know, no wonder this dude had multiple personalities. Like, it's unreal.
Yeah, and so it was 1950 that she fled to Tacoma, and in 1951 she met Johnny Culpepper Bundy, who worked as a cook. They got married, and Johnny officially adopted Ted. That's where the Bundy name came from. But he was a cow through and through. Like, he looked like his mother. He looked like his grandfather, as you mentioned, which just brings up speculation about whether there was some incest going on.
But I mean, even if there wasn't, he could still look like his grandfather.
Or he could
that
just
makes
look
perfect
like,
sense.
Or he could just look like his mom and his grandfather naturally. It could just happen.
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, if my son looks like my dad, there's nothing wrong.
That's normal. Sometimes traits skip generations.
Exactly. And so maybe the guy that his mother initially got pregnant from, the sailor guy, just didn't have strong genes that passed on to Ted. Because if you look at pictures of his mom, even when she's older, man, they just got the same pointy nose. Like, the facial structure and everything is the same.
Yeah.
His mother, by the way,
he is a cow through and through, Lauren.
Yeah. No. Ted Cowell, man, the killer. It doesn't have the same ring, man. Ted Bundy's just a great name.
Thanks, Johnny.
Yeah. So Johnny Culpepper Bundy, his mother, would marry, and she would go on to have 4 more children with this guy. And as we mentioned, Johnny would officially adopt Ted. Ted would later go on to say that he didn't. The guy was fine, Johnny, but he didn't respect him because he didn't make a lot of money. Like, we talked about how Ted was always like an elitist. Like, the guy was just once Ted went on to college and stuff, he looked down on this guy like he wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
But always wondered about his real dad once he found out that he was an illegitimate child, obviously.
Right. They had 2 girls they had 2 girls together and then a son. And the youngest boy was named Richard, and Ted really took to him almost like a father figure because like you said, he felt like Johnny wasn't sufficient enough to be a male role model, so he took that on his own. So I wonder what happened to Richard, because I didn't hear any more about that. I wonder how he turned out with Ted Bundy basically being his main male role model in his life, you know?
Right.
Like, how did that work out? Was Ted's like, hey, check out these comic books Grandpa gave me.
Yeah.
Like,
here's how you properly hit a woman over the head.
Yeah. See that strangling technique?
Right.
You got to get both hands.
Right. No. You got to take the front seat out of the Volkswagen.
You got to get that out of there. There's not enough room. But the fuel efficiency, listen, when you're going in the mountains, you can't beat it.
You got to offset the weight of the women's bodies with the car seat. It's
Right.
gotta
Get the seat out of there. The car will still ride level.
Yeah.
That's what.
You don't want it to bring attention to the cops seeing the car leaning to one side.
Right.
Now, around this time, Ted's in his teen years. You're talking the early 60s. He's starting to be known for stealing. He was always into theft. Now, there's nothing about arson, which is a common theme with serial killers.
Right.
No arson, no brain damage. However, stealing, he was a klepto for sure. He liked to steal shit. Like I said, he liked to possess things, and he would later do that with women. But he's also getting caught as a peeping Tom. He loved to peep in windows, and this is where you see the...
Yeah.
He's starting to get this obsession.
He's starting to feel comfortable at night, too.
Yeah.
Nighttime was his time. He would just go out, almost kind of like Richard Ramirez, just kind of stare in windows for a while, watch people. before he acted.
And later on, he would do interviews and talk about how he didn't expect it to go to the next level.
Yeah.
But one day, he just went too far one time, and then he went even further the next time. And then once you cross that line, there's no going back.
And he talked about how like he would go into a house, and then he wouldn't do anything, and then he would leave, and it would take him months to recover from that. He'd be like, oh, my God, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I need to calm down and calm down. And then 3 months later, he'd be back at it. And then after that, he'd be like 1 month later, and then 1 week later. And then before you know it, it just escalated into more and more.
Yeah. Ted would graduate from high school in 1965. Smart, always smart, near the top of his class in high school.
Yeah.
I believe he'd end up getting a scholarship and end up attending the University of Puget Sound at the University of Washington.
Right.
Before transferring. Yeah. So he would go to the University of Puget Sound and then transferred to the University of Washington. Early on, during this time, I know he was studying Chinese.
Oh, really?
I don't know if that's widely known, but yeah, he was.
I did not know that.
He thought that China, it was kind of his he had another set of philosophy where he was a Republican all through. We'll get more into that.
Yeah,
but he believed that China was the future, that they were going to someday be the powerhouse, and that we better start speaking Chinese. And he got really into it, and he was really successful at it. I think he got some like awards for speaking Chinese in his early college years. Yeah,
did not know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And that was part of like one of the things that attracted him to, made him attracted to Stephanie Brooks is like he's got this drive. This girl that he meets, Stephanie Brooks, this is the one we've been alluding to, that was like his idea of a perfect woman. He couldn't believe.
Right. And this is an alias, by the way. I don't know if her real name's out there. There's a multiple aliases. Like my book called her Carla.
Okay.
There's just different
I
things.
hate that. Yeah. The stranger beside me, not Stephanie. She called her Stephanie.
Yeah. Almost. This is girl. The most popular. Stephanie Brooks is the most popular alias.
But then a girl that he ends up being with for a long time, right after Stephanie,
Liz.
who we'll get to, she called her Meg through the whole book. Like 17 hours, I'm used to her hearing Meg. And at the end, she goes, "I've been calling her Meg, but her real name's." I'm like, God damn it! I'm like, I can't get Meg out of my head now.
Her name's Elizabeth, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Ted would drop out of school in 1968. He would end up re-enrolling soon, but during that time after he dropped out is when he would get into his breakup with this girl Stephanie Brooks. Now he was infatuated with this girl. They would spend a summer or two together. He couldn't believe she was extremely.
This is the girl we were talking about that came from a good family,
rich,
very driven, very focused. She had a bright future ahead of her.
Now she was going to college in Washington. That's where they met, but she was from California, and that's where her rich family was and all that stuff. And after she would break up with him, it was kind of like proof to him that he was inferior to her. Like he couldn't believe she was with them, and then when she broke up with him, he's like, "See, I knew I wasn't good enough." And this is another thing. It's like between the illegitimacy as a child and then this, it's like he was never good enough, no matter how hard he tried. I think is what really took him over the edge.
Right, and after her, a woman of her status or whatever, he did not want to go down.
Yeah,
he didn't want to go down. So it's just.
And it's around the same time. It's around the same time after the breakup with Stephanie that it's believed that he found out about the truth about his birth parents. Well, I mean,
fantastic.
Yeah. If he didn't already kind of have hints, now
he knew, man.
Now supposedly he saw a birth certificate from either his cousin showed it to him or he found it.
Right.
Something happened. Shortly after that, in 1969, he met a woman named Liz Klopfer, who was known as Meg in the book.
Right.
In the book that I read.
Meg, I think, or Meg. You got me calling her Meg after one time. I fucking heard Liz
it's an easy name,
the whole time. But
Liz.
No, I think what attracted him to Liz was kind of a rebound, and she was not quite on his level from what I heard. Like she was a lot shorter as far as girls that he dated. Maybe not quite as pretty, not quite as talented.
Let's put it this way: as infatuated that Ted was with Stephanie.
Yep.
Liz was infatuated with Ted.
Yep.
Liz felt inferior to Ted and couldn't believe he was dating her.
Right.
She found him to be really attractive, which most women found, when they if they could get past the weird factor with him.
He
had a weird vibe,
Yeah.
but he was an attractive dude and he was a chameleon-like looking person. You might see a million pictures of Ted and he looks different in all of them. You know what I mean?
I agree.
But for the most part, an attractive dude, except for the unibrow pictures.
Right. I was like, dude, you got one little razor, man.
Right. But they would end up spending a long time together. They would have a stormy 6-year relationship. And she would stay with him through a lot of allegations. She would question whether he would end up being this guy that he's alleged to be later on.
She put up with a lot of shit.
She suspected that he was seeing other women. He was.
And
she kept going back to Stephanie. He was still obsessed with Stephanie while he was dating
There was
Liz.
a point in the relationship she knew that.
Yeah.
Like, she would ask him, hey, can we go to dinner tonight? Whatever. He's like, I got plans. What plans? I just got plans. Don't worry about it. And she knew he was seeing other women or whatever.
Well, Liz, she was just insecure. She'd just gotten a divorce. And she had a 6-year-old daughter at the time who Ted was great to, apparently, which is crazy when you think later on he ended up abducting a girl about this girl's age at the time that he abducted her. This was many years later, but still, like, it's just crazy. We talked about that in our last episode, how you could be cool to one kid and then just abduct a different
And Liz
one.
was totally comfortable with Ted around her daughter.
Yeah.
Like, she was totally comfortable. He treated her nice. He played with her. And
well, the thing about Ted is, we talked about him being a sociopath and like, I just don't know that he ever had this like a conscious if he was one of us, you know what I mean? Like I think maybe something happened in the early teens when he discovered his illegitimacy and all that. Like he's like, everything, my whole life's been a lie.
Yeah.
And then he just started to like imitate human beings at a certain point. He became like an automatron. Like anyone that met him, they thought he was being real, but he wasn't being real.
He just showed you what you wanted to see.
Yeah, he was a chameleon, and he looked like a chameleon.
I hear that word a lot researching him. Chameleon, the many faces of Ted Bundy. Yeah. I agree. He could contort his face.
I think he got it really, really good at imitating a person. And like he was really good at imitating whatever person they wanted him to be. Like with Ann Rule, he was a very... Like when she worked alongside him, which we're going to be getting to pretty soon, at the Suicide Hotline Crisis Center. It was basically just a crisis center. Anyone that was going through something crazy could call in and they could get help.
Right.
And working alongside Ted, she said that he was the most compassionate, like genuine, like she could talk to him and he would completely listen and give her great advice. And he would, on her birthday, bring her flowers and he would send her thoughtful cards and he would write poems for her.
Yeah.
Even in jail later on, he would send her poems and write her letters and how are you and all this. And she was like, he was like this throwback, because during this time, there's a lot of dudes with, a lot of hippie dudes with beards and blah, 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 all this stuff.
Yeah.
Ted was like a well-dressed, clean cut, like what your mom would want you to
on
date.
the side.
What your mom would want you to date. Like really respectful to women. She said he was like overly like, she never saw him like he was super. What's the
like empathetic, right?
Empathetic, but a throwback in the way to like the 50s, the way men used to treat women. What's that word?
Chivalrous.
Yeah, he was like exactly.
Okay.
That was her view of him,
and Anne was a little bit older than him, so she really respected that trait.
She was old enough to almost be his mother.
And you know what? This kind of goes back to what we were just saying. Maybe he just showed Anne that because he realized she was an older, more respectable woman, and he wanted her to see him as this chivalrous, kind of a old soul type person.
But that's my point, is that he was just a chameleon personality. Yep. He was imitating what he thought people wanted him to be, but he didn't know who he was, And then he had these impulses that he couldn't control that just got out of control at a certain point.
I think he's just doing anything just to hold down the real
To his professors, he was the perfect student to a lot of them. Some of them, but there was some recommendations that professors in college wrote that you can read, and they're just glowing reviews like, this guy, I highly recommend him for your university. I'm upset to lose him. Mm-hmm. He was, and I think he was doing the same thing for his professors. He was being this brainiac, perfect student for them.
Right.
But
absolutely. Just showing them exactly what they wanted to see.
This guy's so endlessly fascinating to me, man. Like you said, the many faces of Ted.
I take back what I said earlier. He'd probably be a great actor. I take it back.
Who?
Ted Bundy. Remember I said earlier, I said if he was an actor, we'd call him like a C-list. No, he'd be like a
He'd fit right in freaking bullshit Hollywood. They're all phonies just like Ted. He'd be perfect for it. Maybe he wouldn't have killed people. He would have gotten all the attention he needed.
Doesn't everybody in Hollywood have a few scandals in their past?
All right.
We can't forgive this guy. Come on.
All right.
Like.
And so, so he met Liz in 1969. He then enrolled at the University of Washington in 1970. This time as a psychology major. He was an honor student and highly respected by his professors. That's what we talked about. And then in 1971, he started working at the Seattle Suicide Hotline Crisis Center alongside Ann Rule. They made a great little partnership there. She talked about how there was times where they understood each other perfectly. Like Ann would get a call. Say Ann would get a call.
Yeah.
And this person was suicidal.
Yeah.
She would stay cognizant to this person and like talk him through it.
Right.
And she would be making hand motions to Ted, who would run and start
start his Volkswagen and be like, I'll be right there.
Yes.
Just come outside and
I'll
meet
take
me.
care of your problems for you.
I'll take you to a place where you have no more troubles. No.
Yes. No. She would make hand motions, and they understood each other's body language perfectly to where Ted would go use their software to locate the person's location and send medical personnel there to make sure that the person couldn't harm themselves. That type of thing. They had that type of understanding for each other, and they would, like I said,
so
being
Ted
friends.
knew where all these people who didn't want to live lived.
Yes.
That's great. That's great information.
He was
for him.
stalking every one of them in his bug.
I wouldn't doubt it, honestly.
We need to change the creep. We need some Volkswagen stickers now. Although there is a time where he steals a van and tries to abduct a girl in a van.
Oh, does he?
Yes. It all comes full circle at a certain point.
All right.
Yes. So as they worked alongside each other, that's where Anne met him, and they would end up communicating all the way through up until his death, pretty much.
Right.
After graduation in 1972, Bundy turned to politics as a Republican, a staunch Republican, all the way through.
Right.
He joined Governor Daniel J. Evans during his re-election campaign, and he would go traveling around to doing his speeches. He loved the politics vibe. It's because he was a fake person.
Well, you know what?
He loved seeing a politician at work telling the crowd what they want to hear, and then going to a different city with a different set of views and telling that crowd what they want to hear. He loved that.
No, do you know what Ted's number one job was for this guy?
What?
It was to go to the Democratic rallies. He was going to the Democratic rallies and spying and blending in, acting like he would even wear like the pin for the Democratic guy. I can just see him there with his clipboard.
Right.
Yeah. You know, he's sitting there writing stuff down. Yeah, he says he's going to do this.
Right.
Yeah. He would do that.
Yeah, and
he would blend in there.
His job,
again, the chameleon.
His job working for the campaign was to blend in. He would record the speeches a lot of times.
Right.
And he was working his way up in the Republican Party scene. And he was also, during this time, he was broken up still about the breakup from Stephanie.
Yeah.
While dating Liz.
Yeah.
But he's trying to build up his resume to be respectable enough to hopefully get back with Stephanie. It's kind of what's going on.
That's always been in the back of his mind.
And it fucking works.
It does.
It works. He gets to the point where Stephanie's still checking in,
and
she starts hearing and seeing that he's this important guy.
Hey, are you successful yet? No?
Right.
Okay, I'll call you tomorrow.
I'll call you in a week and see how you're doing. If at a certain point he gets to the point where she's impressed enough, they start seeing each other again, unbeknownst to Liz.
Right.
And at a certain point he gets engaged. He proposes to Stephanie.
Yeah.
She says yes. And then he says, "Fuck you, bitch."
No, fuck you, I'm out of here, bitch.
He got what he wanted. He made her feel like shit.
I'm going to be the mayor of this bitch.
I thought that was so great that he got this freaking stuck-up girl back, and then he said, "Nah, I'm good. I got what I wanted."
Oh, my God. Right?
Oh, so great. I don't even know what time where we're at in the timeline with that, but I know it happens somewhere around here.
It does, yeah.
When he's doing well in the Republican Party.
Yep.
He gets her back. He's like even driving like the governor's car around or something. Like somebody high up he's driving their car, picking her up, taking her out to these fancy. He was a guy that like loved like Shakespeare and like he would put on this grandeur vibe. Like when he takes Stephanie out, it was perfect. His perfect opportunity to like show her this great wine that he found, and he was that type of guy. If you hear his voice talk, some people say he almost sounds English in you're like,
do that on purpose.
Where did you get this like accent from? You know what I mean? Like
because I think subconsciously he saw that as like a more respectable and more sophisticated way
that's
to
the way
speak,
he viewed himself.
Which it sounds more sophisticated than the American.
He had a great
accent,
voice,
so
dude.
For sure. We could have had him on the podcast, man, if he was still here.
Oh, he would make a great radio personality.
Yeah, he would. Man.
He could change minute to minute. He could make you believe that
he
believes
Ted, right?
staunchly in this viewpoint, and then the next commercial break he'd come out with a different one.
He would be doing a 2-person podcast. It'd just be him.
Right? Exactly. What do you think, Ted? Well, I think this. What do you think, Ted?
I think it's jolly good.
Right. So he would end up attending UPS in the fall of 73 and then dropped out by April of 74. I think he got what he wanted out of Stephanie, and then he was like, I don't need to keep up this great school scholar thing. Not for me. I'm going to go kill women now. They look like Stephanie.
That look like Stephanie, right.
So this is around when Ted started to kill. It's not really known completely who his first victim was. Some people say it's this. Some people say he killed when he was 15 and he killed an 8-year-old girl. That there was a 8-year-old girl who's still an open case, who lived near where he lived when he was 15, and it seems to fit. But he
knew the
swears
family.
it wasn't him, and he has no real reason to lie at the end. He could have said, "Yeah, it was me," but he said it wasn't. And
But here's the thing, though.
I don't believe he killed her.
You have an 8-year-old girl on your resume. That does not look good. That doesn't sound like
Yeah, that's
something
true.
Ted Bundy would admit to.
Yeah, and even in the end, he really didn't like talking about the younger girls that he abducted.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like 8. That if he did do it, that's not something he would.
But I just
ever
don't
admit
know
to.
that his psyche was at that point when he was 15 yet. I think it started developing in his early 20s. It had to get to a certain point.
Well, I've heard a slightly different theory about that. Like maybe he abducted her and was fooling around with her because she trusted him because their families were friends and things, and he accidentally may have killed her. Maybe he lost control, impulses. Maybe some of these images he'd been seeing in these comic books his whole life.
It kind of fits. I mean, some of the bigger, like Gary Ridgway, he killed when he was a young teenager, and then he didn't kill again until many, many years later. So I mean, it's definitely possible.
It's kind of like it's sitting right there, and then that urge is down deep. Just like what was it, the vampire at Dusseldorf, Peter Curtin, who drowned those 2 kids just on a whim. Like he didn't plan to drown those kids, but they were like, "Oh, they're there. Let's just hold them under." Yeah. I wonder if that may have been it, and then he just he was still unsure about who he was. He could have even blocked it out.
Kids have,
for all we know.
I think kids all go through a certain stage when they're real young of like curiosity to reality. Like, does this really happen? I've heard about these things. Like, what really happens if I kill someone? Maybe if you're in that darker, like if you're a Ted Bundy when you're younger. Like this is my example of when I was a child.
Okay,
I didn't know how real reality was as far as like, I'm told a weed eater can hurt you, right? Or like this or that can harm you. Right. But I almost have to test the water. So like when I was like 5 years old, my mom was out weed eating in the yard, and I stuck my hand in the weed eater.
Nice.
And I still have the scar from it. And my mom felt horrible, like she did it.
Yeah.
And it was completely my fault. I ran by and stuck my hand in it, acted like I was playing, stuck my hand in it just to see what would happen. And I got a face with reality. Mm-hmm. And maybe this is just a darker side for Ted or Gary, where it's like, will the person really die if I hold them underwater, or will it?
Yeah.
That's just the way my head works. Man, I'm just thinking.
No,
maybe that's what was going on in his psyche
to explore that type of thing. Yeah,
yeah.
I had a similar thing with the treadmill when I was like 3. Mm-hmm. My parents would tell me I was over at my grandparents' house, and
let's see if my mom's full of
treadmill. Yeah, I had a treadmill, right? Yeah. And they were like, "Don't touch it, whatever. No, never touch it. Don't play on it, whatever." And I turned it on. And I got on it, and I fucking face planted. I got on it, of course I'm going to put it on full blast,
Right.
And I jumped on it and just busted my head open. I needed like 10 stitches on my forehead.
Yeah. Like, I guess my parents were right.
Yeah, I guess they were right. Shit. I guess it was. Yeah. Lesson learned. Hey, now I know.
Exactly.
Start slow.
And Ted knew, okay, I guess this little girl can die if I strangle her.
Maybe, man.
I've heard about it in these crime magazines, but that's real.
That's brutal, though.
Now, Ted's earliest documented murder was in 1974. However, he claimed at this time that he had mastered the necessary skills to leave minimal evidence.
Already, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, so we're going to start getting into some killings. Now, as all big-time serial killers that have a high body count, we kind of have to rail through them. It's unfortunate for the victims that we don't give them 10, 15 minutes each to get to know who they were and all this stuff, but that's just the nature of talking about a serial killer that killed anywhere from 36 to some say in the hundreds.
Right.
But these are the known victims of Ted Bundy. On January 4th, 1974, 18-year-old Karen Sparks, a dancer and student at University of Washington, was asleep in her bed. Ted entered the basement apartment. Now, we talked about him spying through people's windows and stuff like that.
I'm sure he watched her multiple, because I think, wasn't there someone else that lived with her and had stated that they had seen something outside the window, but they just wrote it off like it maybe was wind or tree
I'm not sure.
or whatever. I think it was. I think she was living without a roommate or something, and they had thought that they seen somebody after, because later they told the police, after she was abducted or whatever, but told the police that they thought that they'd seen someone standing outside the window a couple nights in a row or whatever. And I'm like, if you see something multiple times, you might need to, if you see something, say something, people.
Yeah. He's very opportunist, like Richard Ramirez, where if you left an opening, if you left a window unlocked, or you left something like with the Omega murders that we'll get to in Florida, there was a malfunctioning lock, a lock to their sorority room where it was supposed to be locked, and the lock was broken, and he utilized that to get in.
Yep. They were getting it rekeyed. They were kind of in the process, but so none of the sorority girls' keys were working, so they just left it unlocked all the time. Yeah.
But we'll get to that. This is his dipping his feet in the water, potentially type of like brutal attack in the middle of the night on a woman, where he crossed that line. He's been watching watching women through windows and whatnot. This is where he crosses the line.
Right.
He entered the basement of Karen Sparks, bludgeoned her while she slept, then sexually assaulted her with a metal rod that he took from her bed frame. She was unconscious for 10 days, but ended up surviving with permanent disabilities. So he crossed the line. He didn't kill this one. He could have. She survives. A month later, this is where we get to the monthly killings. He was killing at this point every month, or assaulting every month.
Right.
A month later, on February 1st, Linda Ann Healy, another University of Washington student, and this one's crazy. She was a moving radio reporter for like, she did like weather reports for skiing and stuff like that.
Yeah, she was kind of a big personality in this area.
Yeah, she had the great cute voice on the radio, and it may have been where he got his infatuation with her. I could see it because he was into skiing.
Yeah.
At one point, he told someone he knew that he was going to move to Colorado. He was going to Colorado for the winter to become a ski instructor, and like he had brand new skis all of a sudden that he probably stole.
Right.
So like he was into skiing.
I think skiing was kind of a status symbol then too, especially in that area.
No doubt, rich people.
Right.
Like he wanted to be that, and that's.
You could see him with a sweater tied around his neck. You know.
Yeah.
Skiing.
Yeah, so she was a kind of a well-known kid or a girl that was doing ski reports and stuff like that on the radio. Well, she didn't come into work one morning. She was always known to be steady. Like 5:30 a.m., she'd be up. She'd be there to do the radio show. Didn't come in. Wasn't seen at dinner that night.
Because when her 5:30 alarm went off, she also had a roommate. I mean, most of these people did. It was college town.
Yeah.
Okay, so her roommate like got so annoyed at her alarm consistently going off, and she was like yelling at her from the other room. And she finally gets up and goes in there, right? And opens the door. The bed's made. Everything looks good. Goes over there, cuts the alarm off. Yeah. So now this is even more time that's being bought because nothing looks out of place.
Yeah.
And then the phone rings at the apartment, and it's Linda's work, and they're asking her and then her roommate picks up the phone, right? And she's like, "Well, Linda's not here. She's already left for work." And they're like, "Well, she's not here." And then even then. She didn't think nothing of it. She thought, well, maybe she stayed the night somewhere else.
Or maybe like she didn't show up to dinner for her parents. She didn't show up to
dinner for her parents. And then that was the last straw. Apparently she did every night that night of the week or whatever. She was always there.
Yeah. And so when her room was inspected further, they found blood on her pillow, and they found a nightgown hanging up in her closet, I believe, that had blood stains on it.
And they still didn't suspect foul play because of how it was cleaned up, because she was also known to suffer from like bad bloody noses. So that's what they assumed happened. Like she was sleeping on her back. She started bleeding. It was running down her face onto the pillow and then on her nightgown. And then she hung her nightgown up. Why would you hang your nightgown up and not wash it though? Like that's
why would someone come in, harm her, and then hang her bloody nightgown up too? That's just also strange.
That's true. It is. It's very strange.
That would throw me off for sure. If I'm like, okay, well, why would?
And he made her bed.
Yeah.
But she never made her bed. So that was kind of a mistake he made.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, well, he had abducted her. He'd broken in, struck her while she slept, which is kind of a Ted Bundy thing.
Yeah.
Knocked her unconscious, abducted her, took her to his Volkswagen, I'm assuming. We talked about his Volkswagen. He had like a little, some say brown, but we saw pictures of it later at a museum.
It looks very light tan to me.
Yeah, kind of a lightish
like
tan.
Like an off-white almost.
That he would remove the passenger seat from as a way of stowing away women's unconscious bodies easier. Super creepy. And he loved it because he wanted a fuel-efficient vehicle because he hated stopping for gas. And if you're a killer who's killing here and there, it makes sense. That's a trail.
And also, it was more convenient for him while traveling to not have that seat because now the body is basically laying in the floorboard. There's not an unconscious body slumped over in the side like a lot of killers did, like Randy Kraft, like he was known for that.
Right.
Like that's how he got pulled over. I mean, it's kind of suspicious when you got a body banging against the window as you're going down the interstate,
No doubt. And the fuel efficiency, here's an example later on. We talked about maybe him being attributed to more killings, and they're trying to connect things like, okay, on the books, we know you killed these, but what about this one? There was one that he admitted to later when he was on death row or when he was about to be executed, to killing someone in Idaho, which was a state that it wasn't believed that he had killed anyone in. But he talked about how, I believe when he was in Colorado, he made a trip to Idaho specifically to kill someone. And he made sure that he had enough gas to get I think it was Pocatello that he went to.
Right.
He said he killed someone in Boise and Pocatello.
Okay.
And they ended up connecting one of the two. He said he killed two in Idaho, and one of the people, they found a missing person, a girl that fit. It was at the same time frame, and they ended up giving the credit to Ted killing her later on. But yeah, that was an example of the fuel efficiency of the bug. He went from Colorado to a town in Idaho and back on the same tank of gas. It was like 350 miles or something that it was able to do. And so like he didn't leave a trail where he purchased gas on a stolen credit card, which he would do a lot of times.
Yeah.
You know, known for stealing everything. Like at a certain point after one of his jailbreaks, which we'll get to, he's just stealing. He's stealing credit cards. He's stealing purses. He's stealing. That's how he's getting around. No cash, but just charging up everything on people's cards.
This dude's nuts, man.
Yeah. So then again, on the next month, March 12th, 19-year-old Donna Gail Manson left her dorm at Evergreen State College to attend a jazz concert. Now, this girl was known to be kind of a drifter sort. She was known for depression. She often hitchhiked, so it wasn't surprising that she wasn't seen for a little while.
Right.
He had abducted her and killed her. And Donna Manson was never seen again. Shortly before his execution in 1989, he confessed to murdering Donna. He claimed that her partial remains had been discovered in the Taylor Mountains. That we'll talk more about the Taylor Mountains in Washington State. In 1975, I think they found a femur bone that they couldn't accredit to anybody.
Yeah.
There was like an extra femur bone, and I think that's the only thing that was left of Donna. A lot of his victims, he would leave in the mountains, and animals would get to him and whatnot. On April 17th, Susan Elaine Rancourt left an advisors meeting at Central Washington State College, never made it home. On March 3rd, 1975, police searching around the Taylor Mountain area where he had kind of a little dump site there, and also kind of a macabre, like, place he would go back and visit his victims and maybe have sex with their corpses. He was into necrophilia.
A lot of times he would decapitate them too, and then bury the heads because he felt like that was the only true way to identify them, maybe with dental records or whatnot. But he would bury the heads. Yeah. Sometimes he would play with the heads a little bit too.
Yeah. One reason why we don't use a Wikipedia as an immediate source is I went there this morning just to look around after we'd already gotten all of our research and everything.
Oh, God.
Right on the front page, it says, several skulls were found in his apartment. I'm like, I think you got this mixed up with Jeffrey Dahmer.
No.
Dude. This is, no. So don't trust Wikipedia, guys.
Right.
Then a month later, May 6th, Roberta Parks left her dorm at Oregon State to go have coffee with friends, but never arrived. From later interviews with Ted, it seems as that he raped her and then several hours later raped her again before killing her. He only confessed to her murder shortly before his execution. After everything had been exhausted, we'll talk about how many stays of execution he ended up getting, how many times he appealed, and his trickery in the courtroom that kept him alive for many years after when he should have been killed. But in the end, when he knew it was all over, he started confessing to some of these murders finally. And this was one of them right here. On June 1st, Brenda Carroll Ball left Flame Tavern in Burien, Washington, and was last seen talking to a man with a sling on his arm.
Right.
We're going to talk about that for a minute. All the different ways that he would abduct these girls was very cunning, clever, and just evil. Just like it's just so sad because you tend to even like these girls a little bit more. Just the fact that they were like the kind of women they were the kind of person that if someone needed help, they were willing to do it. Like that just makes it even worse. Like he's preying on like good people. You know what I mean? Like,
and then some of these women just didn't want to say no. They just felt uncomfortable. They didn't want to seem, rude.
Anne Rule made the case that, and we were talking about this before the show started. She made the case that you could, on almost all of his victims, you could connect them together in that they were going through something on the day that they were abducted. Either they were going through some depression that was talked about by their friends, or like two of the girls, their fathers had heart attacks recently. Like they survived, but they were dealing with that. Like one of the girls had gotten into an argument with her father, and then that day he had a heart attack and was in the hospital, and that was on her mind when Ted abducted her. A lot of these girls, they'd either just gotten in a breakup with their boyfriend and they were upset about it.
Right.
There was something that was going on with them during the time where they were just, their guard was down.
Absolutely.
And they were like, they were upset. They're walking their minds on something else. This guy comes up to him with a sling on. He's carrying a fucking big luggage thing that he can't, and he keeps dropping it.
Yeah.
Ted would do that. He would carry a
big thing of books.
A big suitcase.
Books and
He'd
shit.
carry like a big suitcase and be fumbling around a parking lot with it with a freaking sling on. And these girls or like crutches. That's what it was.
Right, yeah.
He'd wear crutches with a cast.
Yeah.
And he got it from like doing some kind of like medical aid thing. He was going through some like training for like, anyways, he took all his shit from like a medical facility, He had crutches with like the stuff to make his own cast. He'd have like a fresh cast on.
Yeah.
And that's
it was kind of more like a, what do you call it, a splint or
a sling or a splint or
like a splint. Like he would have the metal part that goes on the bottom, and then he would wrap it with like ace bandage.
Yeah,
because that threw a lot of women off because they're like,
it's not even a real
cast looked. It wasn't real. It was just like it looked like just a wrap. You know, and then he had his arm in a sling.
Yeah,
and then sometimes he would even. Like if he would walk up to him and nudge him with the arm that's in a sling, or point them in the direction, or grab their arm with that arm that's in a sling, and they're like, "Whoa!"
And that's my point. Is that now that I've studied deeply into it, if you hear someone say, "Oh, he was charismatic," and he would just lure them to his car,
no, sometimes he was pushy.
No, he was always pushy. He was always pushy, and the only girls that he was able actually successfully abducting were girls that had their mind on something else, that weren't fully in tune with their surroundings, because so many girls. After girls were coming up missing, would say, I saw this guy. He was strange. He came up to me asking for help. I got a weird vibe from him, and I fucking ran, or I walked away, or I avoided him, or I started going back to his car with him, and he just gave me a weird vibe, and I left. There's a girl that we'll talk about that testified against him, who jumped out of his car and started running because he was just something was not right from the get-go.
Right.
After that was when he was pretending to be a police officer, and she still was like, "No, you're not."
Oh, yeah.
That was another thing.
That was a crazy one.
That was another thing he would do. Yeah, he would pretend to be a police officer.
Yeah,
but like he would even like some of the girls that would refuse right away. He would they would try to go walk around him, and he would cut them off and like just stare through them. Like that's the girls that would later go to the police and report this weirdo that's been walking around the campus doing this stuff. They would say, I saw him, like he was staring at me as soon as I came within view of him. And he asked me for help with this, and I just felt wrong about it. When I tried to go around him, he would like cut off my path to go around him, and then I had to like juke him to get by him. And like it's just that's what several women said that same thing, where he would go to he would ask him for help, and they would say no, and then he would start cutting off, and then they would have to like make this weird movement to get around him, and like I'm so glad I got away from that guy.
Well, he was,
and then they would find out one of their friends got abducted by some guy with crutches or whatever. And like that's the guy.
That's the guy, right?
And they'd see like sketches of this guy, and they'd be like, "That's him."
And he would obviously make a spectacle of himself, because there were plenty of people who testified and heard actual conversations of him. So that means they were in like at the lake or at parks and stuff. Like they had to been zeroing in on him, because he was giving them an eerie feeling. You know how it is?
Yeah.
Like when you see somebody at a park, it's like that gives you an eerie feeling. And they just walk up to another stranger. You're kind of watching them. You're just like, and you're kind of zeroing in, even though there's other things going on. So that means for these people to have these actual verbatim conversations that they testified,
stuck in their head.
That guy stuck. Yeah, that's right. It stuck out to them, and it gave more people an eerie feeling than it didn't.
Yeah.
Like people, like you said, they try to make him out like this huge, suave, charismatic guy. Everybody loved him, but really, in reality, probably more people were put off by him.
Yes,
he knew it was a numbers game. He knew it was a game of averages.
Exactly.
And if he asked enough people, eventually somebody, and he would not leave until somebody went with him.
Mm-hmm. And that's why he was seen so many times. Like in this instance with Brenda Carroll Ball, who he got from the Flame Tavern. I believe she was the one that went to a concert or something like that, and she was trying to get a ride home from a musician, and then he wouldn't give her a ride. He was going the opposite direction, and she was in the parking lot, and she was seen getting into a light brown VW Bug with a man with a sling on, and later in 1975, her skull would end up being recovered from the Taylor Mountain dump site, which we talked about.
Right.
And so she needed a ride. Maybe that's the only reason she got in. Maybe. She was also kind of known to be a drifter, I believe. She would take often rides from people and this and that. So either they were distracted that day, or they were just kind of known to be too trusting of random strangers.
Yeah. But I mean, I think a lot of people were pretty trusting of strangers, and that just goes to show how creepy he really was. Because
well, this is the early 70s, so like serial killer, the term serial killer hadn't even been found yet. It hadn't even been funded.
It should have been.
It should have been. But this is when they were really starting to kick off. Like 74, we talked about, was the year of fear. So we're right in that right now, but it's like, I think later in the 70s, girls were much more preached to, like, be careful, weary of strangers and this and that, because of guys like Ted Bundy.
Right.
There was one girl a month up until the point we're at now. June 11th, University of Washington student Georgianne Hawkins disappeared while walking in an alley between her sorority and her boyfriend's dormitory. Now, I saw a video of this alleyway. Have you seen it? It's freaking crazy. There was like a 30-foot window of darkness where she was going from building to building in an alley, and somehow he must have hit her over the head in there. That's the only thing that makes sense.
He led her back to the parking lot where his car was. So check this out. So she is in the alley, right? And she's talking to someone on the second story balcony.
Yeah.
One of her friends about a Spanish
Her friend
test
watches
or
her walk
something.
off.
Yeah, he watches her walk off until she hits the darkness.
Yeah.
But while they're talking, they hear somebody in the alley. Like the friend later testified, he's like, yeah, I heard someone like laughing.
Oh my God.
Like in the alley. And the only thing they can put together is like, he was just so excited. He was like, this is perfect. She's by herself. It's dark. Like I'm definitely, this is going to be a home run, right?
Yeah.
And he just kept glancing over there and they didn't see anybody.
Yeah.
And then you just let your friend just like walk over there to this, maniacal person just laughing behind a dumpster or something. But anyways, he caught her walking that way and then changed directions and was like, hey, my car's parked over here. Could you help me? I can't start my car or whatever because my right arm's broken or whatever.
Right.
And so she walked back by the same dorm and her friend had already went inside. It was late. Nobody saw him walk back apparently. But they had to have passed right back through the apartment where the balcony was.
Yeah. There was a story that in Enrol's book, and I can't forgive me, I can't remember which victim it was, but there was a woman that supposedly, or maybe she got away, and this was her story, but like supposedly he had disabled her car. She went out to get into her car, and he had disabled it, and he came over acting like, oh, I can give you a jump or whatever. Yeah. I don't have any jumper cables. I have them back at my place.
Oh my God!
So if jump in my car, we'll go get the jumper cables.
No, you go get the jumper cables. I'll wait here.
That's just like the level, the extent that he would go to, like the level of creepiness that he was capable of was just staggering. And he was playing on their goodwill of other human beings, wanting to believe that this guy is sincere.
Yeah. Here's my thing, Lauren. Okay, I'd like to hear your take on this very quick. Okay.
Yeah.
Before we get too far, so 9 times out of 10, he would bring them around to the passenger side, right? Mm-hmm. And then before he opened the door or whatever, he would hit them, right?
Yeah.
He would strike them.
He had a crowbar.
Right. He would hide the crowbar somewhere around the house.
In one instance,
the car.
From his own words, during an interview with Keppel, who was the lead investigator during the Green River Task Force. He was on the Green River Task Force, later goes down to Florida to talk with Ted on death row, about to die, and tries to get some information that might be helpful and also try to get some information out of Ted that people wanted to know. And when Ted was talking to him, like real quiet voice, he's so creepy.
Yeah, I know.
He's talking about a certain victim, I can't remember which one, and he was asking, okay, so you got her to walk back to your VW with you, right? And he's like, yeah. And then how did you get her in the car? And he said, well, I struck her over the head. And he said, with what? And he said, there was a crowbar that I had leaning like against the back of my car. So he would get her to walk over there. Maybe he got her to look at something and turn away, and then he would knock him out from behind.
Well, a lot of times he would give them the keys to unlock the car.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my question, though. Here's what I was getting at earlier. 9 times, I'm pretty sure his windows weren't tinted, okay? We saw the bug. Look in the fucking car. Where are you going to sit?
Right.
There's no seat in there. Like, that should be a red flag
well,
right
if
off
he
the
is
bat.
sometimes he's just getting them to carry whatever to the car and open the door for him. Maybe they're not planning on taking a ride with him.
But there were numerous cases where it was always, ride with me here or you need a ride home, right?
Well, the thing
Look in the car. It's a fucking Volkswagen Beetle. It's a bubble of windows. Look, there's no fucking seat in there.
Well, the thing about the bug is it's easy to pop that seat in and out. So maybe there's times where he had the seat in, times where he didn't have the seat in, depending on what he was, what gig he was running that day.
So what do you do? Like whack him, take the seat out, leave it in the parking lot?
No, probably leave it back at his place. He was renting rooms at college, right off of college dorms all the time.
Right, but regardless of that, so the seat's not there when the girls walk up to the car is what I'm getting at.
Okay, but maybe that day he's running the book scam where just bring the books back to my car. Maybe on the day where he's running a scam where it's like I need you to ride with me somewhere, he has the seat in that day. Like it just depends on whether he's bringing his crutches or his freaking sling or his goofy bag that he's pretending to be a police officer that day. He might have his seat in.
Okay.
Depending on what freaking outfit he wears, whether he has a mustache that day or not.
Right.
He was running all kinds of different scams on him.
Okay.
Anything he could do to get him into his car, whether they're knocked out or they were conscious.
I want to know where that seat is. It's not in the car in the museum.
There were stories that were super eerie that he was during interviews with Keppel later where he talked about the one that he knocked out and outside the car, got her in. She like woke up on the drive and started talking like she thought he was her Spanish teacher. Like she had a Spanish exam the next day, and
she started talking in Chinese, and she was
started,
like,
"Oh my god!" No, he said that she was like she thought because she was so out of it that she was doing like studying for her Spanish exam and started talking to him about that. It's just like, oof.
That
and then
had
he knocked
to
her
have
out
been.
Again and
that had to have been the girl we just talked about.
I think so, yeah.
Because she was talking to her friend about the Spanish test.
Yep.
She was super nervous about it.
Yeah.
Because it was
So
the exam
George
was
Ann
tomorrow,
Hawkins.
and she had been out partying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she wasn't ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was trying to reassure her. Well, not Ted, her friend was trying to reassure her, like, "Oh, you'll be fine. You know, you got this."
Get this. During this time, during these disappearances, Bundy was working at the Department of Emergency Services, a government agency involved in the search for missing women.
Of course he was. Where else was
A
he?
wolf in sheep's clothing.
That's
this
right.
Guy. The many faces of Ted. Here's where he met Carol Ann Boone. She was a single mother of 2 who had already been divorced twice. Now remember that name, Carol Ann Boone. Would later mother
she pops
Ted's
back
child.
Spoiler
alert. Crazy.
Right.
On July 12th, Janice Ott, a 23-year-old probation caseworker, and Denise Marie Nunsland, a 19-year-old who was studying to become a computer programmer, became Bundy's next victims. Before, he had always abducted, burglarized at night. However, this time he approached both women at a state park within 4 hours of each other. He gave both women a similar story about needing help unloading a sailboat. Now, he'd never owned a sailboat, but he'd rented them and drove around, but sailed around.
Yeah.
And so he's wearing his arm sling, and he goes up to him along the beach and asking if they can help do this for him, because he obviously can't push his boat out with a sling on his arm.
Right.
This encounter left many eyewitnesses and detailed accounts of the suspect, because
This
he'd
is what we were
approached a
talking
bunch of
about earlier.
women and they felt weird about it and they wouldn't do it. But
Yep.
these 2, for whatever reason, accepted it. Maybe they were just a little nicer, or like we said, more trusting, or maybe they had something else on their mind and they were just like, caught off guard.
Right.
The police in the Seattle area released a flyer with a description and composite sketch to local television stations along with the name Ted.
Yeah,
because he
I was
was
about to say,
giving
he
these
dropped his
women the
name.
name Ted, probably assuming that they were not going to be around to tell anyone anyway.
Yeah. That shows you how confident he was in that his little story was going to be a success.
Right.
Because he felt like, if I just tell them my name's Ted, they're going to be dead anyway. But then he got rejected by all these women that he said his name was Ted to.
Yeah. And so now the media and the police have something to run with, and the police are they put out a tip line, and they're getting flooded with calls. Everyone who knows someone named Ted thinks that it's them.
Yeah.
They have over 200 people on a list that have had multiple mentions from calls.
And he's driving like the most popular car at the time.
Yeah.
So there's probably plenty of Teds that drove Volkswagens.
Yeah. And had a broken arm at some point.
Right.
This list of 200 suspects that had multiple calls, Ted, if your name got more than one call, you'd end up on this list, and there's 200 of them supposedly. Ted Bundy was one of them. A few people were a little maybe suspicious. One of them being his girlfriend Liz's girlfriend. So his longtime girlfriend at this point, he's steady dating Liz.
Yeah,
Liz
is still on the back burner here.
She has this best friend, and I can't remember her name, but Anne Rule talks about her a lot in the book. She's very suspicious of, and it may be believed that Liz thought she was just being a jealous girlfriend. She was not dating him at the moment,
right?
And she was one of those types that I don't like your boyfriend,
yeah.
And so Liz was kind of brushing it off.
We
at
never
first.
go get coffee on Saturdays anymore,
right? Yeah. So her friend's just think about it though, all these things, because there was some things about Ted. Now her best friend that's talking to Liz about this, she had a weary feeling about Ted because one time. It was in she was hanging out at Liz's house, and she caught Ted in the backyard just acting weird. In the middle of the night, she walked out there, and he's just walking around.
He's out there swinging a crowbar, practicing.
Yeah, he was. She just got a weird vibe, and he couldn't explain what he was doing back there.
Yeah.
He was probably peeping in people's windows or something.
Yeah, most likely.
She got a weird vibe, and when Liz started really thinking about things, she started to kind of believe her friend, and she would end up calling. She would be one of the callers that would call.
Yeah.
Later on. Several occasions, she would start to suspect him even more. But there was things that she would later on tell the police that would end up really indicting.
Yeah. At first, she was just making little anonymous calls.
Yeah. I don't know if it could be anything.
She probably felt guilty.
Yeah.
I think she probably felt guilty about giving up Ted, but at the same time, she felt an obligation.
Yeah.
So she was like, if nobody knows it's me, it won't be so bad.
There was obviously things we've talked about that she couldn't explain with Ted, how he would always just disappear for a week here and a week there, wouldn't call. He would keep strange things in his possession, which we're about to get to during his first arrest.
Well, in Kevin Sullivan's book, it said that her friend was always on her about it. But like you said, she might have wrote that off as jealousy or whatever. But it wasn't until a coworker approached her with the flyer and was like,
look at the damn picture.
Doesn't your Ted look exactly like this and drive a Volkswagen?
Yeah.
And then in the flyer, it said maybe may be passing himself off as disabled. And she remembered Ted had crutches in his room. He had slings. She's like, why does he have crutches? He's never been on crutches. And at this point, she'd been with him for 5 years, I think, 5 to 6 years.
And she had seen some other things too. In dating Ted, she'd seen that he had like he had a crowbar in his Volkswagen all the time with like it was like wrapped. He would have things,
a grip on it, had a tennis racket grip on it.
he would have things that could be used as weapons that would have like hand grips on them. No joke. Like,
yeah.
And his excuse to her was that you never know when you're going to run into a riot that you got to break up, because he hated all these protests that were going on during the 60s and 70s. Yeah. He was like we said, staunch Republican, and I'm going to break if you're blocking the highways. We got this shit going on nowadays too. He's one of these guys that would go there and try to break shit up. He really would. So it was believable to her.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she's like, I don't know. So she starts calling, and later on,
like he's over there breaking up riots, only hitting women.
Yeah. Later on, the police would end up talking to her and finding out some very interesting details about Ted behind the scenes, like the weird sex stuff we'll get to. Mm-hmm. But like there were some things about him checking her out in the middle of the night under the sheets with a flashlight, just staring at her body for weird reasons.
Yeah.
Wanting to do.
He's like, oh, I wish you breathed less.
Right. Yeah.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Stuff like that.
It's creepy as hell.
Bondage. He wanted her to do bondage once. She wasn't into it. She's very, normal girl, which is not Ted's forte.
But at the same time, we talked about how fascinated she was with Ted. She really wanted to please him too at the same time. So she was willing to overlook a lot of this.
There was one time she also noticed his theft. It was another thing that was she found weird, is that he was dishonest at times, where she would know that like she would find something that had been stolen, and like she'd know that Ted stole it. And at one point, there was something he either stole something. He stole something, and she confronted him about it. And he said, "If you tell anyone, I'll break your neck."
Okay,
is something he said to her. So
Might
a little bit of a red flag, yeah.
Maybe.
And he also told her that she'd be a lot prettier without a body, just a head.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding.
It's like, could you part your hair in the middle? Thank you, and
thank you for saying that, because we
glazed over that.
We glazed over the fact that it is very, very eerie when you look at just like a collage, if you will, of his victims. A collage. Almost all look the same. Dark brunettes, part down the middle.
Yep.
They all look like his ex-girlfriend. Who he never felt good enough until he got her, and then all of a sudden he was too good for her.
Stephanie Brooks. Yep.
Stephanie Brooks.
They did.
And do you think you feel weird at all if you're Stephanie? Like, feel guilty at all? Like, he's taking out his frustration from me on these girls that look like me. Do you think that maybe she shouldn't feel guilty? Obviously, it has nothing. It's not her fault, but at the same time, you know how you put guilt on yourself for things,
right? Like, I don't know. She can't.
If you see all these pictures of girls that look like you and they're dead now, like you got.
Yeah, that's got to be strange.
Just picture your wife goes rogue. You divorce her, and then she starts killing guys that look just like you. Would you feel a little guilt?
She kills the Property Brothers. She kills Jason Sudeikis.
I was going to say Sudeikis. She kills Sudeikis. So the two that he got on the sailboat scheme, their bodies were discovered off a service road just 2 miles east of where they disappeared by two hunters. This was on September 6th. They were found. There were other bones at the site that Bundy later identified as George Ann Hawkins. We talked about the femur bone, I think.
Right.
6 months later, students from Green River Community College discovered a skull in the Taylor Mountain. The area was taped off, and an additional 3 skulls were found.
There was some volunteer group that like combed the whole area. Mm-hmm. It's like a ton of teenagers and adults volunteered, and they were like on hands and knees, like finding pieces of bones and fragment that animals have spread all over that area.
Yeah. At this point, we talked about the list of guys. They still haven't like zeroed in on the Ted Bundy yet. Mm-hmm. He's just another Ted on this list. And then when they get the calls, they look immediately into the backgrounds of these people, and there's nothing about his background that.
No, law school student, suicide hotline, missing women.
And even his girlfriend that's calling in is kind of like, I don't know, I just felt like I should call.
Well, maybe it might be him, I don't know.
Right. The skulls that were found up in the Taylor Mountain were Healy, Rancourt, Parks, and Ball. Donna Manson's remains were never found. Now we'll go to Idaho, Utah, and Colorado, where he killed more. In August of 1974, Ted received a second acceptance letter from the University of Utah Law School. Now, he'd been trying to get there.
Well, the first one he received, he just kind of blew it off, right? Or he didn't register in time.
Yeah.
Something. He got distracted with, I think, killing women or something. Yeah. And he didn't do it. So
okay.
This is his second letter. He got admitted again.
Okay.
So
with many all these letters of recommendations from his professors.
But he also got declined from a lot of schools. This was definitely not his first choice. Like, he applied for schools in California, Washington, all over the place, but he only got accepted into Utah.
Right.
Twice, apparently.
He would end up moving to Salt Lake City and immediately began to struggle in his studies. Like we talked about, he's a little distracted. The new murders in these areas started a month later. However, these were not discovered until Bundy's confession. On September 2nd, he raped and strangled an unidentified hitchhiker in Idaho. We talked about that one.
And they connected him to that through gas receipts. That was like one of the times where he was using a credit card.
Okay.
And they connected that through a gas receipt, but because it was believed that he wasn't connected to this murder for a long time because they thought, according to Liz, that he didn't leave until September 3rd. Mm-hmm. But actually, these gas receipts showed that he was right in that area on September 2nd. Mm. So I don't know if she was trying to protect him or she just didn't remember the exact date or whatever. But yeah, it matched up perfectly according to his travels and like where he would have been when he left and everything. It would have been right on point to kill that hitchhiker.
That's weird because the part that we talked about earlier, that I said that he said that he went to Idaho and he loved the bug because he could go there and not have to purchase gas and then come right back.
Well, he may have got a gas receipt in Washington, though. I'm saying he could have fueled up in Washington and then he hit the road. Mm-hmm. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
on October 18th, 17-year-old Melissa Ann Smith and daughter of the middle school police chief disappears. She was last seen leaving a pizza parlor. Her naked body was found in a mountainous area near where she disappeared 9 days later. A post-mortem examination brought to light that she may have been alive for up to 7 days after she was abducted.
Whoa.
Not like him usually he was more of a, what do they call it? Not a process killer, but a
result
killer where he just wanted to own their body.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about torturing them or anything like that.
Right. Maybe she just lived through the beating for a while. I don't know. That's awful.
October 31st, Halloween, Laura Ann Aim, also 17 years old, went missing after she left a cafe just after midnight. Her naked body would be found 9 miles away on Thanksgiving Day by hikers.
Who's hiking on Thanksgiving?
It's a good day to hike. You eat a big meal and go burn some calories. Or burn some calories and then come home and eat a big meal. Mm. Both of these girls had suffered through beatings, rapes, been sodomized, and then finally strangled to death. Then on November 8th, we get the first time where he impersonates a police officer.
Oh, yeah, he's getting creative here.
Yeah, so Carol Duranch was working at the Fashion Place Mall in Murray, Utah, when she was approached by a man who was claiming he was an officer. He gave her the name Officer Roseland and asked her to accompany him to the parking lot.
Right, because her car had been broken into, and she had to identify any items that were stolen or whatever.
Right, now, it's funny because it's like you wonder if she's distracted as well, because if someone just comes up to you and you go, is that your car in the parking lot? It's the blue, blah, blah, blah. It's like, how would he know who drives what?
That's true. He must have seen her getting out of it, right? Or something.
Yeah.
That's not referenced in anything I could find as to, what did she say, what kind of car is it then? Or whatever.
Well, no, he brought up what kind of car she drove and said that it had been broken into in the parking lot, but she didn't connect the dots. Like, why does this random guy who I've never met know what kind of car I drive? Just because he's a police officer, he knows.
Right. Apparently, he had a badge too, because at one point she asked for identification. He just
very like a fucking dollar store plastic badge. Because he
probably one of those stickers. He stuck it on the inside of his wallet.
Yeah, because she said that he literally just flashed it for like half a second, and she couldn't even really see it, but it resembled a badge somewhat.
Yeah.
And so she's reluctantly following him to the parking lot, and he was telling her that she needed to file a report at the station when she realized that they were not heading to the police station. So he got her into his car.
Oh yeah.
He brought her to her car and the car wasn't even broken into. Like it looked totally fine.
No,
and she's like, no, it's cool. It's
there
cool.
Was
like
wrong
I'm
with
fine.
Car.
I don't know what's going on here. My car looks totally normal. All my stuff's still in there.
Right.
And he's like, no, come with me. We're gonna need to follow a report. And
Did she question about the Beetle though? And didn't he say there was something?
Oh yeah, because it's not a police car.
There's a scene in the movie too. I don't know if it's word for word, but I watched the scene from the movie and he said something like, oh yeah, the department's making budget cuts. Oh, sometimes we have to use our own vehicles. Like really, budget cuts?
Oh,
really?
Right.
Yeah.
And so driving in his bug, she starts realizing they're not going towards the police station. She knows where it's at, and she starts getting fidgety, trying to get out of the car. He handcuffs one of her hands, And then they get into a struggle.
Right.
And in the struggle, he ends up handcuffing the same wrist twice. So she's got both handcuffs on one wrist. Right.
Damn it.
At which point she was able to open the car door and make an escape. He didn't do a William Bonin, man. He didn't make it to where once you close the passenger door, it can't be opened from the inside.
That's a mistake there.
Yeah.
You should put the child lock on there.
Right.
You probably didn't think about that in the old Bugs.
Yeah. She then went to the police and reported this encounter. So she was one of the survivors, one of the people that made it out.
That's right.
And probably the most important one to this point because she's rather than just seeing a guy trying to like coerce women in parking lots with slings and stuff, she actually was abducted by this guy.
And a lot of women who encountered him and lived underwent some sort of trauma.
Yeah.
So it was hard for them to remember, what he looked like. But with Carol, it wasn't like that.
The police actually didn't they hypnotize? I think that this is one of the girls that they hypnotized. There were several occasions throughout the book that Anne Rule talked about survivors or near misses with Ted where the police would bring him in and have a hypnotist get a clear recollection from their memory, like bring them back to that spot and get a great composite. Like there was composites like you talked about with his girlfriend's friend and how she's like, dude, look at this picture. Like there was great composites out of him during this time.
Like him.
Right. Later that evening, he's back at work again. Going, you just think like after a near miss like that, girl jumps out of your car and everything. Like you'd probably take a break for at least a few days, right? Like the average person.
Well, but the rush was not satisfied.
No.
You know what I mean?
Right.
He still got that hankering.
Yeah. Later that evening, 17-year-old student Deborah Jean Kent was leaving a high school play when she disappeared. I think this is the one where he was at the high school walking around like the play area, and like he at one point I think he approached like one of the coordinators of the play, the school play that was going to go, and that was one of those instances where he tried to cut her off as was asking. He randomly went up to her. She's busy running around trying to organize things, and he walks up to her and he's like, "Oh, I need some help outside with my car. Can you help me real quick?" And she's like, "I'm busy."
What
like,
the fuck?
Yeah, I
have so many things to do right now.
Right. And then when she tried to walk around him, he's cutting her off, and she kept seeing him in this thing, walking around trying to get people to come help him at his car.
Right.
And then sure enough, he did. He was able to get 17-year-old Deborah Jean Kent to leave with him. Many of the students were able to give a police description of the man, and also the key that unlocked the handcuffs that were put on Carol Duranch was found at the scene. So he left his handcuff key there. So they're starting to connect. Like these are all the same person for sure.
Yeah.
Although Ted now sat near the top of the list of suspects, this Ted, not just any Ted, but this Ted Bundy sat near the top of the list of Teds for the growing homicides. There was no real evidence to link him to the crimes. Now, he's got heat on him in Utah, so he decides to go to Colorado. In 1975, he shifted from Utah to Colorado to avoid the police. And on January 12th, a registered nurse named Karen Campbell disappeared while walking to her room at a ski lodge. This one was crazy. So, like, she's in the room with her family, right? They're on a vacation. They're at this ski lodge. They're all what it was is they were hanging down in the lobby of the hotel, like I think just having drinks with friends and stuff.
Right.
And she remembered that she had a magazine up in the room that she wanted to bring down. I don't know if she wanted to show the people or whatever.
Yeah.
She walks back up to her room, and on the way to the room, like in the hallway,
that's where he approaches her, right?
Runs into Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
And somehow he's able to get her outside to her car without being seen.
He felt really comfortable at a ski lodge too. I'm sure he had numerous excuses and could make really good conversation here. So wasn't he a really good skier as well?
I don't know if he was a good skier or not, but he definitely acted like he was.
Yeah.
He told people he was, but I don't know if there's any evidence of this. There's no video of him just carving it up.
He's like Harry on Dumb and Dumber. He probably just bought some skis,
dude,
bought all the cool stuff,
right.
Just walked around. Those your skis? Both of them?
Cool.
Yeah.
So she would be abducted. She would be found naked a month later on the side of a dirt road just outside of the resort. And these things, like, the police were able to connect him to these resorts and stuff because he would keep, he would charge rooms and he would keep like pamphlets from the freaking resorts and things like that. And then later when they would search his apartment, they would find this kind of stuff.
Right.
She had been beaten to death with a blunt object, and there were numerous cuts on her body from a sharp weapon.
That was probably from the ice pick.
Yeah, he kept an ice pick on him. I don't know, man. I don't know what he
wasn't typically like a knife
no,
user.
Yeah,
though.
no. Never heard of him using a knife, really.
Yeah. He was more the blunt object to the head, and then maybe he used the ice pick later on. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Then 3 days later, on March 15th, ski instructor Julie Cunningham, she's 26, she disappeared while walking from her apartment to meet a friend for dinner. So he's just waiting, waiting in dark shadows for these women to be alone.
Right.
and either just approaching them and getting them back to his car, or clubbing them over the head with something.
It's crazy how many women he snatched that were just running a little short errand, maybe running to the bathroom by themselves. It's just a small window that many people don't think as an unsafe situation.
Right. Like the dude's husband at the resort, his wife's just running up to the room to grab a magazine. Like inside the resort, like you'd think she'd be totally safe, right? She's a guest at this place.
Well, like one of the girls he got from the lake. Remember, she was just going to use the restroom.
Yeah.
She was there with friends.
The people close to these girls were just dumbfounded. Like the one walking from building to building in that alley. That's a little bit sketchier because it's an alley. Alleys just bring kind of a whole set of views upon.
But you just saw your friend. You expect to see her in the morning.
She's going from building to building. There's like a 30-foot dark window where she could be snatched up, and it's like stuff that like mothers preach to their kids, and they're like, yeah. There's 30 feet. I can see the building, Mom.
I can see the
right,
and you're gone.
Yeah,
that's all it takes.
Yep. Then on April 6th, Denise Lynn Oliverson, 25 years old, disappeared in Grand Junction near the Utah-Colorado border. She was biking to her parents' house. Her bike and shoes were found nearby. So abducted off the roadway while riding her bike.
Yeah, he's back to like once a month.
Once a month, and even sometimes 3-day windows, like the one at the ski lodge, and then the other ski instructor.
Right, that's right.
That was 3 days, and then we got a month gap here. And then May 6th, 12-year-old Lynette Dawn Culver of Idaho. This is the one I was talking about, where he drove to Idaho just to kill.
Right.
She was in Pocatello, I believe, and 12 years old. Like we said, this is the youngest that he's gone thus far, and it wouldn't be the last time he would go as young as 12 years old.
No, it's not.
She got onto a bus from school. She was in middle school, boarded a bus at Hawthorne Junior High School, bound for Fort Hall, and was never seen again.
Yeah, never made it home. I guess he caught her off the bus.
We're guessing,
maybe the bus parked at a neighborhood street corner, and on her walk there, maybe he got her or something.
Yeah, police investigators initially believed she ran away because, I mean, this wasn't where Bundy was known to be at this time. He just drove over to Idaho, so it was just like kind of unrelated, they thought, you know.
And this kind of happened every time he went to a new state.
Yeah, and you don't know how much Idaho investigators even knew about Bundy.
Right.
You know, he's a big deal in Colorado and maybe even Utah at this point, and Washington. But, But in Idaho, I think they didn't know the wiser. They get their own set of problems to deal with, their own crimes to deal with, and all of a sudden this girl comes up missing. And then he would later confessed to Lynette's murder before his execution in 1989, so held on to that information for many years.
Wow.
14
there's a lot like that where they had no concrete evidence to tie him to them. I mean, without his confessions.
Yeah. This one, it's a little different, too. It said that he drowned her and sexually assaulted her before throwing her into a nearby river. That's the first case where we heard of him drowning someone. Then June 28th, back in Utah, he abducts Susan Curtis from her campus of Brigham Young University, BYU. This was the last murder that he confessed to before his execution. Her remains were never found, though. Some of these girls, like, he would confess to it, and he would try to tell them, like, a general area, but, I mean, they couldn't find it because it would be in some woods somewhere.
Right, and he wasn't...
It's been so long for him.
He didn't typically bury all the remains either.
Right.
Or if he did bury anything, it was usually very small.
A lot of times, like we talked about, animals would get to his victims.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They would just get spread out. So.
Yeah. Now, here's where the police start to make some connections here. Because of the murders in Washington State were still unsolved and had ended as abruptly as they started, they teamed up with the King County Police in Oregon to use the computer to compile a list of suspects, inputting overwhelming amounts of data from the tip hotline, eyewitness accounts, and the known description and car of the suspect that the suspect drove. So they're starting to connect these different states. They're going, okay, they're once a month in Colorado, and then all of a sudden we get girls coming up missing in Utah, not in Colorado. So they're starting to connect all these dots, and they're seeing that all the descriptions from witnesses are the same. This guy freaking wearing casts and stuff, driving a freaking bug.
Right.
And the different states' investigators are starting to come together now.
And also that accent that he talked in.
Yeah.
Right? I tried to really hear it in some of his later interviews. I think he kind of dropped it after a while. I don't know if it was part of his act or what.
Yeah.
Or if like he was trying.
Well, he always had a grandiose voice, like a voice for radio or something, like old school. Like
he did
very clear and concise and like slow talking.
Yeah.
You know, John, like it's
It's
a douchey, like self-serving type voice where it's like you're waiting for my every word.
Right. It's like he closes his eyes and thinks about like, how can these feeble-minded people understand what I'm about to say? Let me put it in layman's terms for you.
Right.
Yeah, it does. He's got that condescending tone.
And it's gross in the end in his final interrogations with Keppel where he's like having to bring these old murders back up. Keppel's trying to dig him out of them, and he's cringing at the stuff that he did, but it almost feels like he's doing it as to try and put out the vibe that he's human.
Yeah.
It's like you don't believe that he actually feels that disgusted by what he did, but he's trying to put this appearance that like, it just hurts so much to bring this up.
Yeah.
You know, it's like bullshit, dude. Like you did it.
Yeah, it
Come
hurts
on.
you. God damn.
Right.
Yeah.
Like stop trying to act like you have remorse. We know you don't.
Right,
Like,
right.
I don't think you ever did.
Somebody that kills once a month, man, you just don't have remorse.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not be a choice that you made to not have remorse, but you don't have any.
Right. Now their list of names, the Ted list, Ted Bundy was the one that had been coming up the most.
Yeah.
And fit the most. He just started to connect too many things, and he became the main suspect.
Oh yeah, he's the number one seed right here.
Yeah. And then on August 16th, 1975, Bundy is cruising around in a suburb of Salt Lake City.
Right.
In the early morning, so it's still dark out, and there's a police officer, a patrol officer, who's observing him cruising around. And this is a neighborhood he's worked. He's like, I don't recognize this vehicle. I don't know why it's up in here.
Right.
And so he gets behind the car, which then turns off its lights, and it's Ted Bundy in his VW.
No.
And starts to flee the patrol car. Officer eventually gets him pulled over and noticed that the Volkswagen's front passenger seat had been removed. That's as he's walking up. He's saying, okay, that's a little weird. Searches the car, finds a ski mask, crowbar,
with Ted's
handcuffs.
consent, by the way. With Ted's consent.
Yeah, searches the car, crowbar, pantyhose, handcuffs, the whole killer kit.
Ski mask, the kit that's on Google Images.
Ice pick. But initially, this patrol officer thinks that it's burglary tools.
Right.
Brings him in on an arrest for some kind of a burglary, attempted burglary type of thing.
Right.
Where it's like, we know you're gonna commit burglary if you haven't already.
Yeah.
Brings him in.
But I collect serial killers.
Yeah, and Bundy's excuses for like the stuff that he had was so stupid. He said that he found the handcuffs in a dumpster, and that he was going to put them in his curio cabinet or some shit.
It's trash day. I'm just seeing what I can find.
Right. And that the ski mask and the pantyhose with the eyes cut out on them were just to keep warm when skiing.
Oh, of course.
Well, it's a ski mask. What do you mean? It's for skiing.
Those people actually wear those skiing.
All right. Yeah, so they bring him in, and then once in the police station, Detective Jerry Thompson started to connect some things. He said, there's something not right about this guy. He remembered a suspect and a car description from the November Duranch kidnapping. We talked about the girl that escaped.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And then
that's
also,
where he posed as a police officer.
Yeah, and he remembered the name Ted Bundy from Ted Bundy's girlfriend, Liz Klopfer, calling in, and so he gets Ted to agree to a search of his apartment. It's not an actual court-ordered police warrant where they're searching for certain items. They're just doing a walk around his apartment to see what's up. Inside, they found some stuff that was interesting. They found a guide to Colorado ski resorts with check marks by the Wildwood Inn and a brochure advertising the Viewmont High School play in Bountiful, where Deborah Kent had disappeared.
Absolutely.
Now that, to me, that's like beyond. That's a fucking X that says, "Yeah, I kidnapped this girl." Why are you doing? What are you doing at a high school play when you don't know anyone there?
Yeah.
And then suspiciously, this girl comes up missing there, and you happen to have check marks on maps and different
at the ski resort.
A woman came pamphlets where women were missing, and it's the police at this point. They know pretty much. They know it's him, but they don't have anything that they can hold him on arrest for these kidnappings and stuff like that.
Right.
And he would end up being released on his own recognizance, but nothing like sufficiently, like we talked about, was enough to keep him.
Exactly.
Bundy later said that the police that searched his apartment missed a collection of photographs of his victims. Much like Dahmer, I believe there was an instance where the kid escaped Dahmer. The police brought him back after Dahmer convinced them that it was just a little fight between them.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And the police were kind of uncomfortable with the homosexuality situation.
And if they'd actually looked around his apartment properly, I believe there was either a body in the room or there was Polaroids of chopped up dudes.
I think he had like a head in his apartment at that time.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. He had his shrine was halfway complete.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Bundy said, that's just crazy that he said that there was a collection of Polaroid photographs of victims that were in that apartment and they didn't see them.
Right.
And he also said that after that in close encounter, he destroyed all the photos.
Oh, of course. Naturally.
Yeah. And then in September, he sold his VW Bug to a teenager in Utah. The police would end up impounding the car and dismantling it. That would later be on display at a museum, as we talked about, which is it's real morbid. It's different than the Bonnie and Clyde car. We were kind of talking about that. Like, Bonnie and Clyde car is like feels historic, and it feels like I don't know. It just doesn't have that same just dirtiness to it. Like Bundy.
No, the Ted Bundy car just seems creepy. You're like, man, how many dead bodies laid in this passenger floorboard?
Yeah.
It's not definitely not the same.
Hairs belonging to Carolyn Campbell, Melissa Smith, and Carol DeRanche would later be found in the car.
Hey, the real victim here is that teenager who thought he had his first car, or he or she had their first car, and then now they got it taken away.
Right.
I wonder if they got reimbursed.
Exactly right.
Give them some memorabilia or something they could sell on eBay later on.
Exactly. That is kind of shitty.
Yeah.
Like, I just bought it. It's like, well, if he knew...
All it needed was a passenger seat.
But would you want to keep that if you knew what had happened in that thing? Would you buy a house that you knew something horrific happened in? Like either, say, a suicide or like a murder happened in that house? Like, I don't think I would want to live there.
No, I guess not. But if you didn't
once you know, though, you can't go back. But you'd at least want your money back from the police, right?
Yeah, right? You can buy this car from me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On October 2nd, Carol DeRanche, now we talked about the detective that connected the description of the car and all that stuff to the kidnapping with Carol DeRanche.
Right.
She was able to positively ID Bundy in a police lineup as the man who tried to kidnap her. So now the police got him. Like, they've got something solid that they can hold him on.
Right.
And eventually have a trial on him for. He was also ID'd by witnesses at the high school where Deborah Kent was.
Yeah, she was the 12-year-old, right? No, she was the 17-year-old.
This was
abducted
the high
at
school play, yeah.
Because he walked around there for a while.
Yeah.
Talking to all
kinds
people
of
saw
girls.
his face, heard his voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, the evidence to link him to Kent was not found, so they couldn't really try him on that yet, but they knew it was him.
Yeah. How many eyewitnesses do you need?
I know.
To confirm somebody at a place.
Right. Well, you need a body, you need something that ties him more to it than just people's word.
Okay, that's true.
So he would be arrested and charged with the attempted criminal assault in the Carol DeRanche case. So he's going to undergo trial. He's being held on $15,000 bail. But he was able to make the bail thanks to his parents. His mom always stuck by him. Always.
Mothers do.
All the way to the end. Yeah, I mean, you can't blame him. I can see my wife being like that. Even if my son turns out to be a serial killer, God forbid.
Yeah.
My wife would always love him.
Ironically.
I don't know if I would.
Son of serial killer, lifelong serial killer podcaster, turned serial killer.
Right. So he's out, but he would remain under close supervision. The lead investigators from Utah, Washington, and Colorado all met to discuss their different murder sprees. They came up with the conclusion that Bundy was responsible for all of their cases, and he's still walking the streets at this time. His girlfriend, Liz, would later say that during this time, when he was out on bail between the Carol DeRanche thing, and he was about to get arrested for murder, by the way, which we'll get to. But just during this time while he's walking the streets, the surveillance was there. Like, she said that anytime they'd walk out on the patio or they would go anywhere, there would be so many cars, unmarked cars sitting outside that would start up. It sounded like the Indy 500. So
it's like a train of black SUVs following him around.
Right.
Crown Vics.
Yeah. Now, when the DeRanche trial came, he chose to not have a jury. He wanted to just try to convince the judge. Mm-hmm. He was given a public defender, and he would end up being sentenced to 1 to 15 years, which is quite a gap there. It's kind of random.
Yeah, it is.
1 to 15 years. He was found guilty in the DeRanche case. The judge didn't buy whatever the defense was going on. And after that, Bundy would fire his public defender, and he'd be sentenced, like we said, in Utah prison for that. Mm-hmm. And then by November, he would end up being charged with murder of the Karen Campbell case in Colorado, where he would then be transferred back to Aspen, Colorado in January of 1977 to stand trial for that. Now, after losing in the Carol DeRanche case, and he no longer wanted the public defender. He wanted to defend himself in this murder trial.
Exactly.
And here's where you see
his law experience. Why not, right?
Yeah, I think he had a year of law school.
I mean, that's plenty, I think.
For when you got an ego like him.
How long does it take to be a lawyer?
You got an ego like him. He's watched plenty of Matlock, and you'd see him strut around the courtroom in several different times where he'd defend himself in murder cases.
Yeah.
Strutting around, he'd see him sit, and there'd be times you watch the video where like the judge would be like, he didn't even know it was his turn to stand up and interview, and it's terrible for the victims because there's several times where someone that he sexually assaulted
had to be questioned
by the guy who did it.
Yeah,
and multiple, and not just once. Like there'd be appeals, they'd have to come back and do it again.
Yep,
it's just it's awful. And he's like I said, he's strutting around and he's so confident.
Nothing's catching him by surprise.
Yeah, and the judge is like, Ted, and he's sitting there like, oh, my turn.
Objection! It's my turn.
Right. Yeah. And so, but being his own defense gave him special privileges, which may have been some kind of a ploy for a possible escape.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was part of it the whole time.
Yeah. So once in Aspen, Colorado, he chooses to defend himself, and he's given the privileges to go to the library with no chains, no handcuffs, nothing like that.
Not even a jumpsuit.
Street clothes.
Yep.
Once up in there, supposedly supposed to be studying to defend himself.
Right.
He views an open window that he'd been keeping an eye on. He'd been keeping all this eye on this window, and I guess people that like were around him, they were saying like they almost thought he was messing with them because he kept like day after day he'd go over to that window and look down and like look out. And
I don't think I can make that jump.
One day he decided he could. He opens the window, jumps out, spraining his ankle. There was like a 4-inch divot in the ground where he landed. It was such a high jump, and he's gone.
Took off.
Right.
And I mean, he's not easily noticeable. And he probably just like made a different facial expression, and then nobody could tell it was him.
Right.
Grew out his beard a little bit, probably.
Right. Well, this is June in Colorado, so it could have been. At least it wasn't, December, January, February, one of those in the heat right in the middle of winter.
Well, then there'd just be snow tracks. Be like, yeah, he's over there.
Right. And he's out there, and he's running through the mountains and whatnot. I guess he makes it over some mountain pass, and he'd end up being caught 6 days later when he was pulled over in a stolen car for reckless driving. I think he'd like broken into somebody's cabin, didn't he? And like stolen a gun and food and stuff like that. And they were kind of tracking him that way. They were tracking him because he's breaking into cabins and watching people. I think he said he was standing in the woods near a cabin up there in the mountains in Colorado and planning on breaking in, but the people were still there and he could hear him talking about him.
Oh, wow.
About how, I wonder if Ted Bundy's going to come by. He's nearby. You broke out. Sure enough, he's breaking into their house later, stealing their gun and shit.
He's knocking on the door. As a matter of fact.
Right. What's kind of funny is that he was so confident leading up to the escape. Mm-hmm. Like he thought that the prosecution was so weak, and he was just bragging about, they have no chance, and all this stuff. And then he fucking jumps out a window and runs off.
He's saying I have no chance of being caught. I think that's his thing. I think it was the phrasing and a lot of the later interviews.
Yeah,
where he was planning these escapes because he did an interview
also
right before that. He was like, "There's no way I'm going to jail."
But also, he felt real confident in this trial, in the murder trial of Karen Campbell. He felt real confident that the prosecution they were inexperienced and they were weak, and that he could defend himself in this. And then he runs off. And then when he got recaptured, he still felt pretty confident. Everyone around him felt pretty confident, and it's so silly. It's like a normal, rational person looking at this trial. It was a weak prosecution during this time that he was facing in this, and they didn't have a lot. They didn't have DNA. They didn't have, it was a lot of just the weird coincidences in his early days of being,
nowadays
it's like
they could put him at the scene. But
he left. I mean, he left evidence everywhere. But this is the 70s, like you talked about. We don't have DNA, and even like the hair comparisons and stuff in the day, there was still like, as a prosecution, you could argue like, or the defense could argue like, well, it's hair. Like they could only narrow it down to like a certain percentage of like, well, this is most likely this person's hair.
Right.
Looking at it through a microscope, it looks the same, but it's not. There's no 100% DNA. This is 1 in a billion type of like 1 in 300 million type of thing.
Yep.
There's a lot of circumstantial shit, and he would have most likely been a free man had he just made it through this trial. Even as his own defender, he could have.
That's still temporary, though, right? I mean, I think if he wins this trial here, it's still temporary.
Yeah.
It's just buying him time.
Yeah, you're right.
There's too much out there.
Maybe
right
he
now.
knew that all these states were coming against him, and there was going to be just one murder trial after another. While he's on trial for this one, the other murder cases are just getting stronger. They're acquiring more stuff.
There's no way he makes it.
So while he's on trial, he starts hatching up a new escape plan. He ended up he got a hacksaw blade from other inmates, accumulated $500 in cash, that he smuggled over a 6-month period, and he was getting help from a woman named Carol Ann Boone.
Yeah, that's where he was getting most of the money.
Yeah, and then during evenings, while other prisoners were showering, he sawed a hole in the about 1 foot. So above him in this jail cell, they were putting in a light fixture, and there was, I guess it was in mid construction, and there was like a metal plate covering where they were going to put the light in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Seriously, people?
Right. So he would take the plate out, and then he was sawing at concrete with this little saw blade.
Right.
And he was doing it every night, and then replacing the metal plate covering it.
Right.
And every night,
that's brilliant. You gave him his own freaking poster to cover the hole.
Right. And it was, I guess the ceiling in the cell was high enough to where it was so short that he could get up on the bed and get up in there. And at a certain point, he gets this thing cut out, and he's going up in there and walking around up in the fucking. He's walking around in the ceiling or crawling around up in the ceiling space.
Didn't he lose like 35 pounds to be able to fit through the hole or something?
And he's not eating during this time.
Yeah.
And he always, during his trials, he's always complaining about the jail, about the prisons, the prison life, saying he's not getting fed right.
Yeah.
And he's not getting, it's inhumane, the treatment. And he would use those excuses to get, more rights within the prison. And so he was always working the system.
Right.
He was a fucking brilliant man when it came to that. He knew how to work the system. That's why he got so many stays of execution in the end.
Right. And I think a lot of this was being televised too at this point. I mean, he's big news at this point. So he's also trying to gain empathy from the public. I think people watching, you know what I mean?
Well, I don't know what would he get from the public though?
Just empathy in general. Just gaining people on your side, being like, oh, this man's being mistreated. It hasn't even been proven that he's done this or whatever.
And also maybe for the jury is maybe what you're saying. If he's saying this stuff during his trial, defending himself, saying he's getting mistreated in prison,
absolutely,
and he's not able to properly defend himself, he can try and get retrials and things like that. If he's, I'm malnourished, I can't even defend myself properly.
Right.
He was always working the system. He's brilliant in that. And meanwhile, he's also working on an escape, which no one saw coming. Like, the dude is freaking sawing at his roof, walking around up inside the inner parts of the prison.
My thing is they're not like
sheetrock
dust and
I think it's a
like
jail.
laying all on the floor. Like, was he sweeping this stuff up?
I think it's safe to say this is a jail though that he's in, which is, jail, escaping from jails and escaping from prisons is a different story. But
right. Yeah, we've learned that, if nothing else, during this podcast.
Right. And so, and he's waiting for the right moment. He's on several nights he's gone up in there and found the right spot. He finally found the spot where he can come down from the ceiling tiles up in there. He's walking around like freaking Bender in Breakfast Club, crawling around up in there, and he finds a spot where he can come down into the freaking.
It's like a living quarters of a guard.
No, not a guard. Like the head of the fucking jail. It was the chief jailer who was out for the evening with his wife. It was December 30th. It was
Didn't he sit up there for a second? Waited.
Well, he
for
waited.
The jailer to leave.
Well, it was going to be he was getting moved. He was going to get a new change of revenue to Denver because he'd talked about how it was he was too popular in Aspen and he wasn't going to get a fair trial because the jury all knew him and all that stuff. Right. So he gets a change of venue to Denver and he's impending the move to Denver, so he needs to make his break soon, and it's perfect timing because it's December 30th. Most of the jail staff's on Christmas break, or they're fucking getting drunk that night after they get off, and they're just waiting. A lot of nonviolent prisoners were on furlough with their families, so they weren't even there. And so he piles up books in his room. He's found where he's going to come out, and it's going to be into the chief jailer's freaking room. He found a way to go through the prison down, because a lot of these chief jailers, they live at the jail.
Right.
And so he found a spot where he can go down into the chief jailer's closet, I think.
Yeah.
And so he piles up all of his law books and stuff that he's supposed to be using for his own defense on his bed, underneath his bed sheets, makes it look like he's sleeping. And he'd also, like we talked about, been not eating. So at this time, he's not eating breakfast. Mm-hmm. And everyone, all the wardens know that. They're walking around and they put the breakfast there. And every day at lunchtime, his breakfast is still sitting there. Right. He's starving himself to go through this hole, but he's acting like he's just mistreated and he doesn't like the food or something.
Exactly.
I forget what his excuse was for not eating breakfast.
Right.
He's fasting, intermittent fasting or something.
Yeah.
And so it's understood that they're not going to really see Bundy. They're not expecting him to be seen from the night of dinner until lunchtime the next day. There's a good 12+ hour period there. Yeah. They bring his breakfast. It sits there. And then at lunchtime, they have to spot Bundy inside the jail cell. Yeah. And so they set his breakfast there that morning. No, whatever.
Probably tapping on the bars.
He's already gone. He left at midnight, December 30th,
like a scene out of a movie. They pull the sheets back.
And what's crazy is in Anne Rule's book, she talked about how he's sitting over the apartment and he can hear the chief jailer and his wife talking, and he almost thought it was like a scripted conversation, like they knew he was up there. Like they were having a conversation, and I guess the chief jailer was like, oh, "You want to go to a movie tonight, babe?" Or I think maybe the wife said, "Do you want to go to a movie tonight?" And he's like, "Sure." And Bundy's sitting up there are they fucking trying to screw with me right now?
They're just going to stand in one place and make foot noises?
This is all too perfect. Yeah, exactly. But sure enough, they actually...
we're leaving now.
We're leaving.
We're leaving. You can come. I mean, if somebody wanted to come in here, they could.
Right? So they leave. He goes down into the closet of the chief jailer, steals some of the guy's clothes, which goes unnoticed at first. I guess he comes back into his closet and everything looked normal. He just walks out the chief jailer's front door, and he's free again. And he becomes a legend in Colorado at this point. There's people wearing like Bundy T-shirts. They're all like, and there's radio shows that are joking about him. And it's like, he was like a big joke. There was drinks being made at bars. They were like Bundy drinks, and like you can't keep this guy locked up. He's a freaking magician and all this shit.
Well, you see this in the point of a lot of the big serial killers. It becomes there's a part where there's like this underground fandom kind of going on already.
Right.
So
after stealing a car, he would drive eastward out of Glenwood Springs, and the car. He knew the car. It was kind of a junker. He would find cars that had just keys in them. You know, like that old gag on the freaking visor.
Yeah, he's pulled the visor.
The one that he found that had keys was a hunker, and he knew it wouldn't be able to make it over the mountain out of Glenwood Springs. It broke down in the mountains, where he was able to get a passing motorist to give him a ride to Vail, which is 60 miles away. From there, he caught a bus to Denver. Where he boarded a morning flight to Chicago, and by the time he was on the morning flight to Chicago, the jailer still hadn't even found him. Because he said he didn't eat breakfast.
Right.
They're bringing him his breakfast. By the time that they realized he was gone at lunchtime, and they saw the books under the bed and stuff, he's already freaking in Chicago at this time.
Damn.
Right. It was 17 hours later that they finally discovered that he was gone, and he was already in Chicago.
Golly.
And then from Chicago, he traveled by train to Ann Arbor, Michigan. There on January 2nd in a local tavern, he watched his alma mater, University of Washington, beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl.
Oh, insult to injury. Everything's going his way. He's probably like thinking it's an omen.
Yeah.
Things are looking up.
And at this time, I'm sure he's trying to think. I don't know. Do you think when he was in jail, when he was planning his escape, he had Florida in mind? Or if he's just, once he got out, he was trying to figure out where he wanted to go. It's interesting that
Before we really dug into this case, I'd always heard that about Bundy. I always heard that at this point he was like, I just want to be caught. But I didn't get that from when I really dug into this story and his psyche. I didn't get that point.
Yeah.
I didn't get that vibe from him at this point. I felt like he still wanted to be free, and he wanted to get as far away from Washington as possible. And there's no further place than Florida.
Yeah.
Unless you leave the country.
Well, he loved the beach. That's one thing that a lot of people said about Bundy. He liked to be near the ocean. He liked the smell of the ocean, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And he obviously, Tallahassee, Florida is one of the furthest places you can go from Colorado. I mean, he's from the Pacific Northwest, Washington,
right? That's what
Seattle
I'm saying.
area.
You can't get any further away.
Exactly. So he's going as far away, where no one would suspect him. Tallahassee, and you got a nice college environment near the beach, and so he eventually makes his way from Atlanta, and ends up down in Tallahassee, Florida. And on January 15th, 1978, so he's hanging out. He's there for I believe a week or two. He gets down there. And he's trying to reestablish just a normal life. His initial plan when he went down there was to just get a small apartment. He got a new name. I forget what he was going by at this time.
Chris Hager?
Chris Hagen? Like Hagen. That's what it was. Chris Hagen. He gets an ID. He gets a little room he rents from some old woman. He's doing gardening for her and stuff. He finds a bicycle that's been like trashed, and he builds it back up, and he loves this bicycle. He's riding around. He goes down. He's riding down to the corner store, getting a beer. He doesn't have much cash or whatever, but he's living in this little room. He's enjoying life, and he's like, I forgot how great freedom tasted and all that stuff, but it's a matter of time before the real Bundy comes back.
Oh, yeah.
And his impulses that he cannot control happen, and it doesn't take long. And on January 15th, 1978, so he's hanging out near the campus of FSU, and he enters the Chi Omega sorority house around 2:45 a.m. I don't know if he'd been scoping this out. It said that
he had.
It said that later on there was later on they found out that there was a board at the Chi Omega sorority house that had a list of the women's names that were in the sorority and where their rooms were, which is how they figured maybe he pinpointed which girls he was going to attack, because he'd been following the ones that looked like his ex or whatever.
Yeah,
he didn't attack all the girls in the sorority, and it was supposed to be a lockdown sorority house. They had a mistress that wasn't a mistress, house mother or something that was supposed to be the head of the thing, and she was supposed to be kind of like security, watch over these girls.
Right.
It was supposed to be locked down at night, but like we mentioned earlier in the episode, there was a broken lock that there was in the midst of being fixed, so the door would kind of be like closed over at times.
Right.
That's how he made his entry. He was seen by one girl like crouching in there. There was several girls in the sorority that heard thuds.
Right.
Some of them were a little freaked out by it.
That was coming home as he was leaving.
Yeah.
I think, and he was coming down the stairs, and she hid in the hall closet. She was one of the first people to find the victims.
And there was a few girls that heard like thuds going on, and they didn't know what was going. They didn't know what the hell it was.
Right.
He would end up entering the room of Margaret Bowman, 21 years old, and bludgeoned her to death with a piece of wood. He had like a log.
Yeah, and he had like some kind of fabric wrapped around it as a grip.
Mm-hmm. Very opportunist. I don't know if you got the log just outside the sorority. If this was just something that it doesn't sound like something he really planned though. Like it's like, is he just stalking him because he's a weirdo, and then one night he just can't handle it and he's just going to do it?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess he can only...
Because, like, why would he bring a log? If he's really planning this out, like, a log, really?
I don't know. It may be the perfect thing, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can't really leave fingerprints on a log. All they found was,
Right.
like, pieces of bark and stuff later. It's
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's just a big mess, and it's hard to track.
Yeah. And so he like we mentioned, he bludgeoned Margaret Bowman to death with that log. He then entered the room of Lisa Levy, 20 years old, beat her unconscious, strangled her, bit one of her nipples almost off. I've seen a picture of it. Pretty disgusting. Left a deep bite in her left buttocks and sexually assaulted her. Now this deep bite in the left buttocks of Lisa Levy would be the thing that would later bring him down. It's the one piece of surefire. We talked about how hairs can be kind of inconclusive.
Right.
Like, they can't definitively say 100%. This bite mark that he left when later in a murder trial for her put on display in front of a jury was something that the jury felt very strongly about.
Unmistakable.
Like, it's unmistakable. Like, they brought in a dental expert, and I mean, we'll get more into it, but that did him in. She died shortly after arriving at the hospital. Kathy Kleiner was in the next room, and Ted broke her jaw and left a deep cut on her shoulder. She would end up surviving. Karen Chandler was also home that night. She suffered a broken jaw along with a concussion, loss of teeth, and crushed finger. Some of these women, he beat them so hard with his log that they had like fractures in their skull.
Yeah.
They would end up needing reconstructive surgery on their face. Their teeth would never be the same. They'd end up in dentists every week or so.
Yeah, both Kathy and Karen were survivors.
And they would end up having to go to trial and sit there, and see him more and more. But ultimately, I think that was for the best because it helped closure, seeing him get brought down and knowing that they played a big part in it. They took pride in knowing that they brought him down.
Right.
After leaving this, Ted was not done. He was not satisfied enough. He broke into the apartment of FSU student and aspiring dancer Cheryl Thomas. I think she had a condo or something, and he actually left like the school, and she was in a nearby apartment. Broke in. He dislocated her shoulder, fractured her jaw and skull in numerous places. His encounter with Thomas left her permanently deaf and had equilibrium damage.
Golly. Yeah, this is brutal at this point, man. He's just leaving. Now but he's damning himself too. That's why this part of the story makes me think that he may have just wanted to be caught here. I mean, living that. It's funny that he was living free in Florida. Everything seemed to be going fine. Yep. And then all of a sudden he just snapped and went on this and did something that he never did. Attacked multiple women in one place.
Right.
And left all these witnesses, left people alive.
It was like he's been locked away for a little while.
It's like I'm going to go out with a bang here if I'm going to go out. It's
or either that or his uncontrollable urges. He hasn't been able to satisfy them for so long. It's almost like you're on this strict diet and you love ice cream, and then one night you just freak out and eat an entire tub of ice cream.
Yeah, you just fall into a Baskin Robbins.
To me, I don't know if it was him wanting to get caught or more as him just he had these uncontrollable urges to injure women and to own them. Right. And it's like one night he just snapped and it all just came out.
So you're just saying he went without it way too long.
Yeah. And that's why he went on this damn spree. Like even after beating how many girls in that sorority house, killing 2 of them.
4 of them, yeah.
That still wasn't enough. Yeah, beating 4 of them with a log, killing 2, and it still wasn't enough. He still had to go and beat Cheryl Thomas as well afterwards. It's just, to me, it's just like...
And he, she was a dancer as well. I think we...
Yeah, never able to dance again after that.
Yeah, with the equilibrium damage, you're not going to have any balance. You're not going to be able... Yeah, that's awful.
So after the Chi Omega slayings, here comes the creeper van. So he's no longer driving the Volkswagen. He picks up a van somewhere.
Well, his Volkswagen's been impounded, so...
Yeah, it's gone.
Got to get something new.
He gets some kind of I think like a white panel van, creeper van basically.
Yeah.
And he steals a plate off of a RV somewhere, and he puts that on this van, and he's cruising around, creeping in this van, trying to pick up girls. Mm-hmm. One of them was Lisa Ann Parmenter, 14-year-old. He struck up a conversation with her on February 8th, 1978. He was later identified to be Bundy. So he pulls up. She's alone. He pulls up. He's got the door open right next to her. He's like, trying to get her into this van. She's feeling weird about it. I think her dad was a police officer.
Yep.
And he's talking to her, and all of a sudden her brother pulls up. He's coming to pick her up.
Yeah. Pulls
up, and he's like, "What the hell's going on? Who's this weirdo talking to my sister?"
Yeah.
Confronts him. Bundy's acting all strange. Backs up, gets back into his van, and takes off. The brother and her follow him for a little while. Get the license plate number. Report it to the police. They told their dad, who's the police officer, and he didn't feel good about it either. He looks up the license plate, sees that it's an RV. He goes to the guy who owns the RV. He's like, "Yeah, my plate got stolen."
Yeah.
a week or two ago, and so
they find out the van is stolen as well.
Yeah, they end up hypnotizing Lisa and her brother. She gives an amazing recollection. She's able to like relive this whole thing, and
right.
it's kind of emotional for her. And she's able to pick out Bundy out of a lineup and everything. So they know it's Ted Bundy now.
The brother was as well. He identified him too.
Yeah,
both kids did.
Yeah. And so now using this van, he would pick up his final victim, unfortunately, Kimberly Leach, 14 years old, was dropped off by her parents at middle school.
I think he actually ditched the van here before he got her. I heard that he actually ditched the van.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, because when the girl didn't get in, he's like, "Oh, I guess this is kind of creepy."
Yeah.
So he ditched the van and actually stole another Volkswagen.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So he actually stole another Volkswagen before he went to the school.
This one is just so crazy to me. That's like
it is.
As a parent, like imagine dropping your daughter off at school. Like it's supposed to be a safe place, right?
Right.
Drop your daughter off at school. The school later calls you and saying your daughter didn't come to school. And we're saying, what are you talking about? We dropped her off at school this morning.
Yeah.
And later they would have witnesses that said that she was seen being drugged through the parking lot by her hand by what another parent thought was an angry parent at this at this girl. They didn't know the girl. They just saw an angry man kind of yelling at the girl and dragging her through the parking lot to his vehicle.
Right.
And they just said, oh, she's going to get a spanking. She did something bad or whatever.
I mean, other parents, you don't want to get involved. You're like, oh, okay, that's how they're parenting their children. Who am I to tell them, what they can and can't do?
Right.
I don't know. It's a perfect storm, man. Just a bad situation.
Yeah. And her body would end up being found. The decomposing body of Kimberly Leach was found under a collapsed hog shed in Swanee River State Park, April 7th, 1978. Soil samples and leaves found in the stolen van led investigators to the spot. So it was the van.
Oh, it was the van.
It was the van, and it was there was debris in the back of the van when they did recover it that showed that Kimberly Leach's body had been carried to that spot.
Interesting. But he does ditch the van after this then.
Yes.
'Cause I know he gets the Volkswagen again.
He does. He picks up a Volkswagen, and then his final arrest happens, and it was kind of a fluky thing where it was just a routine traffic stop for speeding.
Yeah.
It would be February 15th, 1978, near the state line of Alabama and Florida. He would be pulled over for speeding by Officer David Lee of the Pensacola Police Department. Once pulled over, the license plate checked and found to belong to a recently stolen automobile. Now, this officer didn't know what he had yet.
Right.
He's just pulling this guy over speeding, and all of a sudden it's a stolen vehicle. So when he attempts to arrest Ted Bundy, he knows this is the end of the rope.
Right.
And this time when he gets pulled over, he's not going to be able to talk his way out of it. He's going to fight. He ends up, when he gets told he's under arrest, he runs from the car, ends up kicking Lee's legs out from under him, running off, and getting shot at.
Yeah. So the officer fires, right? And then he fakes like he got shot, right? And just lays there.
That's how clever this bastard is. He's running away. Police officer shoots, misses, but Ted acts like he got shot, falls down, waits for the cop to come up to him, gets into another scrum with him.
What if the cop just shot in the air and then he just fell? He's like, I know I didn't shoot you. I know I didn't shoot you.
Right.
Could you just get up? Could you?
Let me shoot you again.
All right. I'm really going to shoot you if you don't get up.
Right. Yeah, so eventually the officer is able to overpower him. Bundy at this time, he'd lost all that weight to get up through the jail to escape. And
it's true. It probably took all he had to fight this officer.
Yeah. Upon looking into the stolen Volkswagen that he had, they found 3 of the 4 sorority victims' IDs in the car. Could you have given yourself away any worse than that?
Right. Well,
they already knew what they had once they realized they had Ted Bundy on their hands. But he was once in custody here, though. Like he was assuming the name of the fake ID that he had at the time. What was his name?
Chris Hagen.
Chris Hagen, and they even called Chris Hagen at a certain point, and he's like, "What? No,
no, that's not me.
I didn't do all that." And Ted Bundy's still screwing with him. He knows he's famous at this point, but the Florida police don't know. Who Ted Bundy is.
Right.
Like, he finally gives up his name. Like, he's toying with them, and he finally gives up his name after a long night of interrogation. And he's like, Ted Bundy, and they're like, all right. Like, wah, wah. Like, he thought they were going to be like, holy shit. Yeah. But when they went in and looked his name up, they saw that he was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, and then they started to realize what they had.
Right.
And he's talking to his attorney over the phone, and his attorney's telling him, don't tell them anything. But he starts to kind of break down and starts giving away stuff. He'd end up going... This is where the big trial happens. He never escapes again. Spoiler.
No, he's good now.
2 escapes and done. Never a third one. And initially, for under trial, he was offered a deal of 75 years if he pled guilty to the Bowman, Levy, and Leach murders, but he declined, thinking that he was going to just...
That was the best deal he could have got.
Oh, 100%. He would have avoided the death penalty. Because, I mean, there's a lot of conversation that goes around about Ted Bundy and whether he went to Florida because he knew that was a quick-to-execute
That's what I'd
state.
always heard, yeah.
I don't buy that.
But I didn't find that to be true.
No.
In studying him in depth. I didn't.
No, because he didn't want to die.
Yeah.
All the way to the end, he kept trying to get his stays of execution.
Yeah, even
he
in
kept
his
being successful at it.
His final interview, he said he didn't want to die, and he would do whatever it took to not die.
Yep. Ultimately, during the trial, it would be the bite marks that we talked about on Levy's buttocks that would bring him down.
Yeah.
It was a long and lengthy trial. It kept, being retrials and
oh, of course.
I don't know. I'm not an expert on courtroom stuff, but I know that he just kept getting appeals and appeals and appeals, stays of execution.
Right.
And people are getting pissed because it'd be like the day to execute Bundy, and then some shit would come down where he'd get a stay of execution again. I think it was his 4th stay of execution that he finally ended up getting executed.
Wow.
On July 24th, 1979, he would end up being found guilty of the Bowman and Levy murders. Additionally, he was charged with 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder. He was given the death penalty twice. 6 months later, he was tried and convicted for the murder of Kimberly Leach. Now, the craziness continues because during the penalty phase of the trial, Bundy called his witness, Carol Ann Boone. Now, we mentioned her earlier. He worked with her at the state of Washington. And they'd been writing to each other. She'd become kind of obsessed with Bundy. She moved to Florida to be closer to him. And he would use her as a character witness in his defense.
Right.
Call her to the stand, said what a good guy he is, how he would never do any of this stuff.
Like, this is going to help.
And she, at this point, was obsessed with him becoming her husband. She wanted to marry him. Mm-hmm. And, of course, it wasn't going to be allowed. They weren't going to allow this to happen. But Bundy, being savvy and a law student, he had found back in his days of studying law a little problem in the system of Florida's law books, a little loophole, I guess you'd say, not a problem, but a way to get married. There was a lesser known law that Bundy had discovered that said that if during the courtroom procedure, while someone's on the stand, if you propose to them and they say yes, that you are now legally married because you were in front of a judge.
I think it just had to be in front of a judge anywhere, really.
I thought it had to be during either way. He figured out this loophole, and while she's up there as a character witness, and he's doing his procedures as a friggin' lawyer or whatever, he's standing up there. He proposes, "Will you marry me?" And he did it wrong the first time. He said something. He didn't do it properly. He didn't say, "Will you marry me?" He said something, "Would you like to be my wife?" or something like that. She said yes, and then they said that's not going to be good enough, Bundy. So he went up again and said, "Will you marry?" Can you imagine being someone that he had beaten, and nearly killed, and he killed your friends in a sorority, and then and then this mockery's going on, and he gets married in front of you? Like, it's just disgusting.
Yeah,
it's a joke. It's I mean, it's funny and it's interesting and it's crazy, and it just adds to the allure and the craziness of Bundy, and it's just.
He was just desperate at this time, man.
Desperate, but he's also making a mockery of everything, making a mockery of the system. He stays alive for way longer than he should have been, sitting there on death row, writing to people, gets married in the courtroom, ends up figuring out a way to have sex with her, even though they didn't have conjugal visits in Florida during this time at this prison.
Right.
But there was a thing where it's just, man, sometimes the prison system's so stupid. You know what I mean? Like the guards, how corrupt they can be. Mm-hmm. There was a whole deal that they had at this prison that Bundy was at, that if you gave the guards like $5 or something like that during just regular visits in the big room with everybody where they're all sitting down, you give them $5, you could go behind a vending machine and have sex with people. And so Bundy exploited this with Carol Ann Boone. Mm-hmm. After they got married, she's visiting him. He pays off the guards. They go back there. They're doing this. She ends up pregnant. She's showing up to these courtroom procedures a little bit thicker than normal. All of a sudden, Ted Bundy's a father while on death row, getting these stays of exexecution.
During this whole trial.
Yeah.
Wow.
On 1982, Boone gave birth to a daughter and declared Ted Bundy as the father. After 3 stays of execution and exhausting all avenues of appeals, and with a new date set for his execution, now the public in Florida wants this guy dead so bad. Every time that the day of execution is coming, they're planning to party. They're going to be outside the prison.
Oh, yeah.
And they're calling it like the Bundy barbecue, and they got all these shirts, Fry Bundy, all this stuff. The radio shows they've got all these mocking songs of him, "You're going to die," and all this stuff. And he keeps living, keeps going on. All the media freaks out on the days that he's supposed to be executed. They're all sitting outside the prison waiting, and then they have to call it off. It keeps happening. But he knew eventually his day was going to come. The stories that he told revealed no new evidence that it was concluded. And we talked about during the Gary Ridgway episode how that was one of his ways near the end after his second day of execution. He knew the third one was coming. I believe it's between the second and third that he starts getting desperate and saying, I can start giving you guys more information because he's been withholding he's still saying he's innocent on all this shit.
Exactly.
He starts saying, I can give up some stuff and I can also help out. He writes to Keppel during the investigation of the Green River Killer. This is when Gary Ridgway hasn't been found yet. They're looking for this guy who's killing all these people up in the Pacific Northwest, killing all these women. And he's writes to the investigators of the Green River Killer, and offers his knowledge of
As we talked about that in our Patreon
and so
episode.
we talked about it. So Keppel comes down, and that's when he starts finally near the end when he knows it's over and he's finally going to get killed. He starts giving information, just doing his interviews, I think
it was just too little, too late, man.
Yeah,
I think it was. It was too little, too late. He already passed up all these deals that he had been given. He's at the end of the rope.
Yeah, well, there was a new governor in town. Governor Bob Martinez in Florida, he was not having these stays of execution anymore.
Right.
Bundy, near the end, he got given a date. He was scheduled to die January 24th of 1989, and Governor Bob Martinez said, you're not getting any stays of execution. When Bundy started pleading, saying, I can give up more information, he's saying, well, you better do it in the next 6 days because you're going to be dead. And any attempt by Bundy and his defense to try and get him more stays, it was not going to happen. So on the day, January 24th, he'd been through these days before. He'd been through days that he was supposed to die, and he wasn't nervous because he knew he was going to get out of this time. He knew he wasn't getting out of it. He had scheduled his final interview. He gets the final laugh. He gets to have his say the day of, hours before he dies. Actually,
I think he does the interview on the 23rd.
Did he?
Yeah, because he was executed first thing in the morning at 7:16
Okay,
a.m.
so either way, hours before he's killed.
Right. It'd be the night before, I would think, probably, or the evening before.
Right.
He sat down with that reverend.
Yeah. Reverend James Dobson, the founder of the religious right powerhouse Focus on the Family. He was a prominent anti-pornography advocate. And so Bundy chose this guy, and they'd been communicating for a long time. And it was Bundy's excuse. It was his chance to pass off his crimes on something other than just his own.
Mm-hmm. And I put a little bit of that spill in the intro. You guys want to hear that? That's kind of what Bundy wanted everyone to hear.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd put a little bit of that in there, and also a little bit of what everybody else thought about him too.
This interview was just another face of Bundy, him lying, and he trying to. The whole time he's just full of shit. He's just saying, this effect of pornography on children, it creates monsters like me. And it's like the same argument of people saying that Grand Theft Auto creates killers and video games, violent video games and this and that. And it's
plenty of people grow up, and you have to have that predisposition, I think.
Yeah.
And he does mention that. He does mention that there are
for the right person.
Right. He doesn't
influences.
Yeah. He's not as naive to be like, oh, everyone that looks at violent pornography is going to be a serial killer, but he's definitely heavily suggesting it.
Yeah. Well, Bundy, his execution was finally carried out January 24th, 1989, 7:16 a.m. Old Sparky got him. The electric chair in Florida's prison. We talked about it with Aileen Wuornos. She avoided it because she ended up getting lethal injection, right? But they stopped using Sparky before Aileen Wuornos, but it was still in effect. God, the thing was creepy. If you look up pictures of Old Sparky, it's just creepy. And there's a brick wall behind it, and it's just. And you can see pictures of Ted Bundy's body afterwards, his head all fried up, and it just looks super painful to me.
It looks just like a scene out of the Green Mile.
Yeah, absolutely. Except they used the water on Bundy. They shaved his head, used the water, the electrodes. I think the electricity passes down through your body and out your legs. You can see these nasty bruise marks on his legs.
Right. Whew.
Yeah.
Hard way to go, man.
And
the
prison
deserved it.
And the prison from the outside the lights dim a little bit during it.
Just pulls so much power.
Yeah, it's just, the whole thing's just. Eesh.
All the other doors open.
To a celebrating crowd out there.
Oh yeah, they partied heavy.
The Bundy barbecue.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Ted Bundy, guys.
Ted Bundy.
That's Ted Bundy.
And our career's over. We're done.
The legend. We're retiring now.
That's it. We're done.
Hope you guys enjoyed it. We tried to maintain the same amount of energy in the second half of this. You guys didn't really know, but there was a break between it. We talked about it on Twitter for a minute, but we got about an hour 17 into this, and Michael had to go look at houses and stuff, and he was busy on the original recording day, so we had to cut it off. We didn't realize how long this was going to be. We didn't know it was going to be well over 2 hours.
Right.
And so we cut off in hour 17, and then we came back 2 days later and tried to jump right back into it. We're struggling at first, so hopefully the second half was as good as the first half.
Right.
And hopefully you guys enjoyed this. And hopefully we didn't get too much wrong. This is a lot to cover. This is a serial killer that was awfully busy, and there's a million sources out on Ted Bundy. He's, like we talked about, one of the most infamous guys ever.
Absolutely.
But hopefully you guys liked our rendition of it, and it was worth your money as a Patreon member.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of fun studying it. We would do it again in a heartbeat.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe not the exact case.
Maybe we'll do Ted Bundy Revisited someday. The shit we got wrong. Do it over again.
Well, yeah, there'll probably be one of those. Maybe we'll make that an extra thing later.
Yeah.
All the new shit that we found out.
Ted Bundy redo with an X.
Yeah. The asterisk.
Yeah. That was fun, though. That was a good one.
That was fun. All right, creepers. Welcome back to the present. Hope you enjoyed that little blast from the past from almost 2 years ago. Guys, we want to thank you for your patience. I, Michael, recently have moved across the country again. I'm from North Carolina. I'd moved and lived in Las Vegas for a while. If you don't know, I've moved back to North Carolina, whatever. So it's been a whole ordeal and learning how to record remotely, and we're still working through the kinks of, my new job and working through that schedule and things like that. So thank you all for being patient with us during this time. We will get back on track, and we are still releasing episodes on a weekly basis. It's hard to pinpoint a day right now. That's the problem we're having. But anyways, guys, enough bitching, enough complaining. The podcast is still rolling, okay? It may not be so consistent as far as the release dates, but there will be episodes consistently popping out, okay? So listen to some backlogs or whatever you got to do, to feed that need. Or there's a million other good podcasts out there, So what am I complaining? I'm acting like you guys are complaining, but you're really not, because you are amazing listeners, and we appreciate y'all's support so much. Another person we appreciate the support of is Oh My Gaia. Guys, if you're not trying Oh My Gaia yet, you're going to love it. I'm just saying, it's better. You feel better about yourself. The scents are light. The deodorant is light. You don't have that sticky shit under your armpits and in your hair, guys. You know what I'm saying? Or girls, whatever. I'm not judging. You don't have that shit in your armpit hair. You know what I mean? It feels better. But Oh My Gaia is an innovative all-natural deodorant, fragrance, and Beetle company specializing in paraben and aluminum-free products. Their innovative line of deodorants inhibit the growth of odor-causing bacteria while maintaining effectiveness. At Oh My Gaia, they use only all-natural paraben and aluminum-free organic ingredients. And guys, I promise you there is a scent that you will love. Guys and girls, whoever, there is a scent that you will love. There's even unscented. So if you don't like scents, or maybe you can't smell, maybe you've lost your olfactory sensors. You know what I mean? Maybe you're down to 4 senses. That's okay. We got unscented. Don't waste money on scents. I don't know if it's any cheaper though. I'm gonna check that out at ohmyguy.com. But they have unscented vanilla, cherry almond, sandalwood, lavender, lemongrass, Egyptian musk, coconut, dreamsicle, leather, lumberjack, honeysuckle, fireside. I really like fireside, but my favorite is Egyptian musk. That's the one that that was the first one that I got. Of course, that was before we had our very own scent, True Crime Pine, which you definitely need to try. It has our old school podcast logo where it's just the headshots. Very cool design that Wendy came up with on that. But guys, because you're a True Crime Guys listener, you use the word creeper, and you can get 15% off your order at ohmygaia.com. That's ohmygaia.com, or at shop_ohmygaia on Instagram. That code word is creeper for 15% off. All right, guys, that's pretty much it. I think next week we are taking an off week. Lauren is going hunting, so it's his fault. So, bitch at him. And we'll be back at it in a couple weeks with a real banger that we're kind of excited about. So that will be another freebie. But we'll see you guys later. Keep creeping.
True Crime Guys, in the desert we like a mirage. It's okay if you clicked on us cause you thought we was True Crime Garage. Now we ain't mad at you. Sit down, let us talk at you. I'm talking to the creeper army. We out here making murder, get murder, get murder. True Crime Guys, in the desert we like a mirage. It's okay if you clicked on us cause you thought we was True Crime Garage. Now we ain't mad at you. Sit down, let us talk at you. I'm talking to the creeper army. We out here making murder charming.